The Rejected Luna's Revenge. Written by Short Story Queen. Night draped the Blackclaw Citadel in velvet and frost. I moved through the torchlit gallery, the mind link humming beneath my skin. Patrol check-ins, market jokes, children bargaining for one more story. My name rode that quiet current with warmth I never took for granted. Vesper, my wolf, stretched within. All quiet, but the wind keeps sniffing at us. Curious, not cruel, I whispered. Guards nodded as I passed. Power travels here as echo. I try to keep the echo kind. Thorne waited on the terrace above the gardens, a column of shadow peeled from the night. He wore the crown like it had grown there. Raven hair, broad shoulders, that amber gaze that could soften a room or slice it in half. When I stepped beside him, the bond tugged, warm, inevitable. I let my shoulder graze his sleeve. He didn't lean back. "You sent for me," I said. "A border tangle," he answered, eyes on the far ridge. "Iron Fang scouts testing wards." "We'll reinforce," I said, brushing an ash leaf from his cuff, because the court was watching and small intimacies calm big rooms. "Then invite their alpha to a moot. Feasts solve problems, steel cannot." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You trust them to take bread instead of ground." "I trust leverage," I said, "and roasted boar." He was already turning toward the council table. Lamps burned over scrolls and sharpened quills. Among the advisors, Mira Veyra lifted her chin, golden hair catching firelight, armor too clean to be accidental. She had the patience of a blade on a whetstone. "Watch that one," Vesper murmured. "She smiles with her teeth hidden." "I see her," I said, and felt Vesper settle. The meeting stretched. Reports, stores, the Fletcher's daughter's parade route. Solara spoke rarely. When she did, men leaned closer. She remembered every hill on our borders and the name of each archer lost last winter. Discipline like that is admirable. The hunger under it, less so. After, when wine thinned the room's edges, I slipped back to our chambers. Thorne stood over a map, hands braced on the table as if the kingdom might buck. Ink, leather, a breath of cold iron, the sense of rule. "You used to wait for me," I said too lightly. "I'm here." He didn't look up. "Say the simple thing," Vesper urged. "He's a door. Knock." "I miss you." I set the words down among the compasses and knives. He stilled. "Mira," he said, my name scraped thin. "There are matters requiring your attention." I finished and managed a smile. "I know, I'm not asking you to be less king, only don't be less Thorne." He looked up then. The amber warmed. His hand lifted as if to touch me, then folded into a fist. "Tomorrow," he said, "dawn in the gardens." "It's a poor time to admire roses," I said, though the knot inside me loosened. I brushed my fingers along his knuckles. The bond hummed. He let his hand settle over mine for a heartbeat. We slept back to back, both facing a door only we could see. Blue morning rinsed the city. I walked the outer walkways with the patrol captain while Thorne met a trade envoy he couldn't move. The bond tugged, apologizing. I accepted it. In the courtyard, children chased each other around the dry fountain, the mind link crackling with their victories as if lightning learned to laugh. An ordinary morning with the quiet perfidy of a lullaby. Solara fell into step beside me as we crossed the training yard. Today she smelled faintly of crushed herbs and smoke. "Luna," she said, bowing just enough. Polished voice. "You were luminous at council." "So were you," I said, and left the compliment to hang until it became a question. Her gaze slid to archers loosing at straw men. "The west parapets need new fletchings. I can make a list." "Do," I said. "Give it to Greta in kitchens. She'll feed you while you ink." A blink, then the careful smile. "You remember everything, don't you?" "Only what matters," I said. We parted at the stairwell. I watched the light find her hair and turn it to an argument no one had invited. Curious, Vesper murmured. I agreed. Curiosity is a small stone that starts an avalanche whenever it likes. That evening, the court held a music hour. I sat by the window, fingers curled around a goblet, and watched Thorne as he listened. He would have laughed once, would have pulled me under that vaulted ceiling until the players lost the thread trying to follow our joy. The bond kept offering the shape of that memory. I turned its face away. When the hour ended, I left early. The corridor was a quiet throat swallowing sound. I did not know Solara had slipped away minutes before me. The palace has rooms, even the walls forget. In a storage antechamber 3 floors below, a single candle mapped claws of light across stacked crates. Solara closed the door with her hip, reached beneath a false lid, and drew out a small glass vial. Inside, opalescent liquid coiled and uncoiled like a living thing, catching dreams with its tail. Her face, stripped of court manners, was intent, hungry. Curious night, she whispered, and the smile that ghosted her mouth wasn't careful anymore. On the other side of Stone, unaware, I paused because Vesper lifted her head. Did you hear that? Hear what? I breathed. The wind changed. Her ears pricked in my mind. It learned a new name for you. I stood very still, palm on cool stone, and listened to the city breathe. Somewhere above, a bell tolled the hour. Somewhere below, a lock turned with the softest click. Selara pocketed the vial, blew out the candle, and left the room in darkness. A draft crawled through the corridor, cold as a blade laid on my throat. I did not know whose hand would hold it, only that it was already lifting. Night should have stitched us together. Instead, it tugged at the seams. Before dawn, the mind link hissed with small life. Bakers teasing ovens, sentries trading thin jokes. Thorne's check-ins brushed the current coolly, clipped and formal, like a river under ice. He's bracing, Vesper murmured, calling it weather so he doesn't have to call it a wall. Then we find where it begins, I whispered. By mid-morning, the council chamber smelled of ink and oiled leather. Solara bent over a ledger, posture so precise it cut the sunlight. She didn't look at me when I entered. That told me she'd already taken my measure. Reports came in flurries. A runner claimed Iron Fang scouts had trespassed 3 miles. I named the stream that marks our true border. He amended his tale. Solara's quill scratched once, satisfied. Thorne arrived and took the head of the table, not the chair beside mine. His gaze slid past me to Solara's neat columns, to the blade edge of her efficiency. Nothing improper, unless you count the silence. We won't answer rumors with steel, I said. Send a patrol with food. A soft approach reads like fear, Solara returned. Iron Fang respects teeth. Balance, Thorne said. Supplies. Bows strung. After council, I found him in the East Gallery. Walk with me, I asked. He didn't refuse. Tapestries of old hunts hung above us. What did Solara show you? I asked. Ledgers, arrow counts, the usual. And the unusual? A runner saw you at the North Gate after midnight. I listened to the wards there. You know this. Not usually with Captain Ivar. I sifted the memory. Ivar handing me a report in the cold, breath-clouding lamplight, gloved fingers briefly against mine when I pressed sweet buns from the night kitchen on him. Briefly, I said, 2 scouts present. He nodded, slow, as if agreeing with someone I could not hear. Varek, his wolf, swam behind his eyes. He knows your patterns, Vesper said. Someone is braid-cutting them into snares. He's choosing which music to hear, I answered, keeping my shoulders loose. A servant hurried up, cheeks flushed. Majesty, Luna, pardon. The cellar account doesn't reconcile. Missing casks. Solara arrived as if pulled by the word missing. I can assist, she said mildly. Numbers behave for me. By dusk, she had a brewer's theft laid bare. Thorne thanked her with the tired gratitude of a man setting down a burden. He didn't meet my gaze when he dismissed us. That night, I went to the north gate because stubbornness is a shape grief takes. The ward lines hummed under my palms, threads of power singing in keys only wolves hear. Steady, Vesper said. Whoever's tugging, it isn't from here. Footsteps. Captain Ivar, careful. Forgive me, Luna, the west wall sighed last week. I thought you'd want it. You thought right, I said, softening the words. Tell your mate I miss her spiced nuts. He reddened and left. I dipped my fingers in the ward bowl. Ash-stung stone. For a breath, the mind link flashed Thorne at a distance. Reach, recoil. Morning brought small edges. My blue cloak, always cypress and lemon, carried a thread I could not name. Not Iron Fang, not ours. A foreign note subtle as whispered sin. Do you catch that? Something coaxed, Vesper said. Hothouse flowers and rain that never fell. Not your scent. I hung the cloak back for washing. At council, Selara proposed rotating night patrols, a reasonable shift that nevertheless placed Ivar where rumor runs thick. Thorne approved without looking at me. The East Granary needs new locks, I said. Handled, Solara replied. I sent a smith. Thorne's gaze flicked toward her, grateful. By afternoon, whispers had shape. A maid avoided my eyes and dropped a curtsy too low. The mind link turned formal. Reports to the king first, then a belated Luna. Respectful. Distant. I sought Thorne in the war room. He stood with Solara, map splayed. They straightened when I entered. We need to talk, I said. Solara took a step back. Your Majesties, she murmured, moving for the door. Stay, Thorne said. She stayed. She even gentled her gaze, a trick of light on blue ice. There are rumors, I said. Let me stamp them before they grow legs. I'll speak to captains, market wives. Say the truth outright. Sometimes truth fuels it, Thorne said. Better to let it pass. Let what pass? What have you heard? Nothing I believe. Not yet. Selara cleared her throat. Containment can be mercy. Confrontation makes private matters public. Private matters crept over my skin. Vesper bared her teeth. Ask him straight, Mira. Is there anything you need to ask me? I said, eyes steady. He looked at me, looked through me. No, he said at last. Not now. I left before the ache could show. In our chamber, I opened the chest at the bed's foot. The sprig of wolf's bane I kept for luck lay powdered in its pouch, as if someone had crushed it. I inhaled. Hothouse flowers. The wrong rain. My blue cloak lay folded on the trunk. Clean. Too clean. This is not accident, Vesper said. Someone is painting over your scent. And bringing a painter to admire the work, I whispered. At dusk, the bell tolled once, twice. The great hall swelled with advisors and captains, chairs scraping an uneasy sea. Thorne took the dais. Solara stood one step behind and to the right, where a Luna might. By command of the king, the herald called, voice ringing the rafters, there will be a closed assembly at dawn to address matters of propriety. A hush-like held breath fell. Propriety. Thin ice cracking. Gazes tilted toward me, then away. I kept my chin high. Inside, Vesper went very still. Dawn, she said. They're going to name you at dawn. And I will answer, I told her, while the hall swallowed the silence and Solara's mouth curved by a fraction, as if at a joke only she and the dark understood. Let them come for me. Trumpets braided with drum beats until the great hall trembled. I wore the blue cloak I no longer trusted and a smile I barely recognized. The tiers were full. Every captain, elder, and merchant had been summoned. The air smelled of pine resin and expectation. Vesper paced inside me. Too much ceremony for a simple correction. "It will pass," I told her. "He will see through it." Thorne stood on the dais beneath the wolf sigil, formal black catching the light. He didn't look for me at first. He looked to the right, where Selara waited one step down, armor tidy, hands folded over a ledger she did not need. When his gaze finally found me, the old warmth did not answer. The herald's voice rang off the beams. "By command of Alpha King Thorne Draven, we address matters of conduct and unity." Solara stepped forward as if to fetch a cup for him, and not the ground from under me. "We owe our people clarity," she said, tone crisp, almost gentle. "Rumors injure law more than blades." "The king will speak," I said. My voice did not shake. Thorne braced the lectern. Micro-tremors lived along the tendons. Only someone close would see. I was close, not close enough. "You have heard claims," he said. "Whispers at gates and granaries. Aluna's duties neglected. Midnight meetings, divided loyalties." I stepped forward. "If you have questions, ask me. I will answer in full." Solara glanced toward the tier where Captain Ivar sat, jaw tight. The motion was small and satisfied. Thorne's eyes met mine. "Mira," he said, my name a husk, "for the welfare of Blackclaw, for peace at the borders, for the law that binds us, I name your conduct. Compromised." The word landed like a thrown plate, no blood. Still, the crack echoed. "Say it is false," Vesper urged. "Make him smell the truth." "I have not betrayed you," I said, "nor this pack. I went to the North Gate to listen to the wards. I met a captain because he serves. I carried bread because people are hungry at midnight as well as noon." Selara lifted a parchment. "Affidavits," she said. "Signed." She didn't offer them to the room, only to him. He did not take them. "The mate bond is meant to clear fog," he said quietly. "But fog can mimic softness while it hides cliffs." His voice hardened. "For unity, for the crown, I reject the bond." The world went colorless. Benches scraped. The mind link shivered, 1,000 threads tearing at once and trying to remember the last pattern they wore. In the ripping noise, I could still hear my name, like a bell underwater. I set my palms on the lectern because I needed to put my hands somewhere that was not my body. "Don't," I said, a warm stone thrown at a tide. "Thorne, don't do this. Look at me." He looked. For a heartbeat, his wolf surfaced, amber veined with gold. Varric flinched, then iron dropped back over both of them. "By decree," he said. And the herald repeated, because law likes echo. "Mira Veyra is stripped of the title of Luna." My cloak weighed twice as much. The torque at my throat burned cold. Protocol moved through the room like a trained hound. An attendant stepped to unfasten the silver. I raised my hands and did it myself. The metal clicked on the lectern, tidy as a closed book. I did not weep. I did not beg. Vesper pressed her head against my spine. "Little one," she whispered, "breathe in, out. We stand." The hall watched, greedy for the exact shape of my ruin. I squared my shoulders and drew the blue cloak tight. The coaxed hothouse scent I had not earned rose from the fabric, a foreign signature painted over mine. It made my stomach roll. The room swayed. A soft queasiness lifted, then sank. Barely there. I felt it, and everything in me changed its angle. I pressed my palm against my abdomen, fleeting, smoothing a wrinkle. Solara saw. Delight flashed and vanished. She lowered her lashes and stepped back. Thorne gestured for the final formality. "You are banished from Blackclaw lands before the next moonrise. You may take what you carried here. Nothing more." The crowd parted, creating a corridor I was meant to walk. Someone hissed. Someone else said my name with pity that burned worse. I could not feel the bond the way I had. Where it had sung, there was a silence I did not recognize. The mind link dimmed at my edges, threads unspooling. If I stepped beyond the gate, it would go fully quiet. "We will not be alone," Vesper said. "I am here. Always." "I know," I whispered. I left the torque on the wood and stepped off the dais. I walked through the corridor they had made for my leaving. I heard bare teeth behind closed mouths, a child's confused question. Captain Ivar rose halfway, as if to speak, and thought better of it. The doors opened and Night leaned in. A hand brushed my sleeve. Greta from the kitchens, fingers flour-dusted. "We saved honey cakes," she murmured, voice shaking. "Backstairs, if you need." "Thank you," I said. Behind me, Selara took one measured pace on the dais, testing how it felt beneath a would-be Luna's heel. Outside, cold air made everything simple. In my belly, the smallest flutter returned, not even a movement, a promise. Vesper pressed closer, a warmth under my bones. "We leave now," she said, "while doors are still doors, not walls." From the hall behind, the herald's voice lifted again, calling for oaths. Then another sound cut across it, quieter and more dangerous. The single metallic click of a lock being turned, somewhere deep in the palace, on a door that should never close. I did not yet know whose hand turned it, only that whatever waited beyond it had my name on its tongue. Moonrise came like a blade. I stepped into it. The gate swung behind me and the mind link thinned, then thinned again, a silver thread pulled through two small needle eyes. Greetings turned to echoes. Duty reports faded to mist. One more step across the ward line and the humming chorus of Blackclaw, my chorus, my home, went quiet. Not muted, not distant, gone. "I'm still here," Vesper said, steady as bone. "Breathe once for what ends, twice for what begins." I breathed. The air tasted of wet rock and pine pitch, and something new learning my name. Greta's honey cakes were wrapped in a cloth at the bottom of my satchel. I had taken nothing else that mattered. The torque lay on a table where I had set it with my own hands. If I looked back, I thought I might hear it ringing. I did not look back. The night widened. Forest gathered me in with the old indifference of tall things. I kept to deer paths and shadows, blue cloak bundled under my arm because it carried the wrong rain smell, and I was in no mood to wear another woman's script on my skin. The cold took my fingers and gave them back. I counted that as mercy. Thorne's words trailed me at first like burrs. Compromised. For the crown. For unity. Each phrase polished by law, each sharp where it pressed. Beneath the polished rhetoric lived that small, dry sound the herald made when a decree pleased him. I wanted to scrape it off my memory with a stone. "Do not feed it," Vesper said. "Let it starve." "I will," I told her, "after it begs." My boots found frost-rimed leaves. Far off, a fox yipped, then yipped again to say the joke was private. I moved with care because clumsiness is not a virtue, and because a pup slept under my ribs, a brushing awareness more than a presence, like a hand from the future pressed lightly to the other side of a veil. Hunger threaded through me by the second hour. I ate one cake in 3 bites and forced myself to keep walking. The ground slid into gullies. Owl feathers whispered above. Twice I stopped when the wind turned and brought me scents I did not want. Iron, smudged leather, the careless smoke of men who trusted their fire more than the things that stalk it. Blackclaw scouts, or mercenaries bought with Blackclaw coin. Solara would not have left a clean corridor for my leaving. She liked appearances, not ease. I kept low, crossed a shallow creek on slick stones, and fought the urge to run. Not for speed, for the feeling of it, for the reminder that my muscles remembered joy. "Later," Vesper said. "Run when ground is ours." "Where is ours?" I breathed. "Where your name is not a verdict," By the third hour, the cold sat inside my bones, arranging furniture. My body answered with stubborn mechanics. Step, step, place your hand, now breathe. A wave of queasiness rose and ebbed, then rose again, turning the trees a shade closer to charcoal. I paused to steady myself beneath a fir, my palm pressed to my belly without asking permission. The gesture surprised me enough to soften my jaw. "You will not be born into their lies," I told the emptiness that was not empty. "You will not hear your mother named as if the word were a stain." The forest did not answer, but the smell changed. Less resin, more iron in the water. The land sloped toward the borderlands, a nowhere that belonged to both and neither. Thorne and I had kissed once under a hawthorn just beyond here, when the wards were new and laughter did not worry us. The memory lifted its head and then curled back down, wisely. A twig cracked behind me. Not a rabbit. Wait. I slid into the ferns and put my heartbeat somewhere else, a trick Vesper taught me when we were young and poor, and hunted for the sport of nobler wolves. 3, Vesper said. Left, 1 heavy, 2 light and angry. They moved with the confidence of men who had been told their quarry could not possibly hear them. A murmur, then a laugh that ended too sharply. I tasted the air and knew the oiled leather. Blackclaw, yes, but not on official duty. Men who obeyed Solara's voice and pretended it sounded like the king's. The heavy one found my trail and grunted. I slid deeper, twigs against my cheek, the smell of damp earth filling my head. Footsteps passed within arm's reach, then angled away when the creek shifted their attention to its noise. I waited, counting to 60, then to 60 again. The waiting held cold in its teeth. When I moved, I did it in halves. First breath, then foot, then weight, then the other. The creek took me to an old fallen pine, its root ball a ragged crown. I crawled beneath the arch and slept for minutes or days with my eyes open. The stars walked without me. Dawn came grudgingly, as if ashamed of what night had done. The scouts were gone. The air felt thinner. Borderland air, knifed clean by the absence of anyone's law. I drank from the creek until my teeth ached. The hills rose ahead, low and muscular. Beyond them, another scent. Wolf, many wolves, wind-scrubbed stone, the careful ash of fires tended with discipline, different from ours, iron over earth, Iron Fang. I had never set foot in their lands. We had mapped them, measured them, argued about them. We had laughed once about their name, boys beating their chests with tin canines. Turns out iron is a metal you learn to respect by bleeding on it. Climbing stole what the night had left in me. Halfway up I stopped because my body demanded tribute. I gave it breath, and then I gave it honesty. "I'm afraid," I told Vesper. "I am so tired I could sleep in a wolf's mouth and call it shelter." "I would not let it close," she said. "Lean. I will carry the parts you cannot." I leaned. I climbed. At the ridge, the wind shouldered me like a brother who hadn't learned gentleness. Below, a valley cupped smoke and stone, low buildings set wide apart, watchtowers like blunt teeth. Iron Fang territory at last. I did not step into it. I collapsed into it. The pain did not announce itself. It simply existed, a band cinched low across my belly, not sharp, not damning, but new. Not now, I thought, not this. I breathed slow and counted back from 8 because numbers sometimes loosen knots. "It's warning, not calamity," Vesper said, listening with me. "Your body is saying, do not run, not yet. Walk, walk, and live." Movement at the edge of the valley. Riders, no, runners. Wolves in their other skins, gray and rust and coal, angling toward the ridge. They fanned out with trained economy, voices touching in mind speech I could not hear. I had crossed the line. This was their answer to trespass. I raised my hands, palms open. The gesture felt human and small in a place that favored teeth. The wolves halted just beyond reach and folded back into human form with the modesty of long habit. Men and women both. Leather patched where leather earned it. Weapons clean. The one in front had a scar like a drawn thread along his jaw and eyes the color of strong tea. He took in my posture, my state, the scent that said Blackclaw and something else layered over it like rain that couldn't make up its mind. Name, he said. No bark, no warmth, a line. Mira, I answered. Mira Veyra. His brows ticked. Veyra meant nothing to Iron Fang. Good. He nodded once to the woman on his left. She did not lower her spear. I need... The word tangled in my throat. Pride is useless when you're trying not to shake from exhaustion. I need sanctuary. The spearwoman's mouth went wry. We don't hand it out like bread. I have coin, I said, and heard how foolish that sounded even as I said it. I can work. The leader's gaze flicked to my abdomen, then back to my face. Something altered in his stance. Not soften, recalculate. Take the cloak, he said to no one in particular. It stinks of someone else's garden. Hands moved quick and impersonal. The blue was gone from my shoulders in a blink. The wind bit. I let it. Who hunts you? He asked. A misunderstanding with my former pack, I said carefully, and people who thrive on misunderstandings. He grunted. We thrive on facts. Boots shifted behind me. The wind changed. From the ridge I had just climbed came the rustle of something heavier than a fox, lighter than a bear, confident in ways neither should be at this hour. 3 figures broke the scrub line, Blackclaw leathers, blades low, moving like men who believed the ground belonged to their feet. They were too far to smell me yet, close enough to see me if I stood. The Iron Fang leader lifted 2 fingers. His runners spread like poured water. Decide quickly, he said, eyes on me now, not unkind, not kind. Step forward and you are ours to protect. Stay where you are, and it's a border dispute. We don't bleed for other wolves' troubles. My legs trembled once, then steadied. Vesper pressed against my ribs, calm as winter stone. Choose, she said. Choose the door that opens. I shifted my weight forward into Iron Fang earth. The first Blackclaw scout lifted his head, nostrils flaring, and shouted my name. They spoke my name like a hunt cry. Iron Fang answered with geometry. Wolves flowed around me and became people again, fast, practiced, quiet. The leader, with the scar along his jaw, lifted 2 fingers. A line formed between me and the ridge, where Blackclaw scouts searched the scrub. 1 step more, and I stood on Iron Fang soil proper. The air changed. Iron over earth. Hearth smoke kept on a short leash. Move, the scarred man said, not unkind. He clicked his tongue once, a soft habit that kept time with his thoughts. We don't loiter under another pack's eyes. I went where they put me. Vesper stayed calm, a steady weight at my spine. We're inside a shape, she said. Let it hold until you know which walls bite back. They set a pace my legs could keep. Down from the ridge, through a notch between boulders that looked placed by a hand too large for mountains, along a path tamped by years of disciplined feet. The valley widened into a settlement built without ornament, longhouses low to the ground, watchtowers hammered out of old trees. The scent of a forge locked the corners of the place together like rivets. At the threshold of the largest hall, the scarred man paused. Tea-colored eyes, steady. Reese, he said, tapping his chest. Captain, don't use the rank unless you mean it. Mira, I said, I mean it. He studied my face and then briefly my abdomen. Nothing crude, an accounting. Water first, he decided, then the alpha. Inside warmth grabbed my joints and shook them a little. I let it. Reese passed me a clay cup. I drank and tasted iron in the water and something green, some bitter leaf to wake the mouth. A woman at the hearth glanced over, older than me, braid like rope, hum under her breath that changed key when anyone spoke too loudly. She had healer's hands. She watched the way a hawk does, to measure if a fall might be survived. Reese led me deeper. The hall opened on a room set for talk, not pageant. A table scraped from a single plank, iron bands along its edges, a chair carved to fit one man's spine, not to impress gods. Kaelin Ironfang stood at the far end, speaking low with a runner. Late 30s, as my spy's reports had said, but reports don't capture the gravity that grief makes. His hair was a dark auburn, threaded with umber in the lamplight. A pale scar crossed his jaw as if someone had once tried to erase him and failed. His eyes were a warm brown, gone metallic when they narrowed. There was a ring on a leather thong at his throat. Not worn, carried. He turned. Took me in as if I were a map laid down. Edges, relief, likely fault lines. His wolf, whatever name it owned, breathed through that gaze and did not show teeth. Name, he said. Mira, I answered. Veyra. A flicker. That surname meant nothing to his people. To him it was a data point, foreign, soft in the mouth, not a northern coil of consonants. Pack, he said. The word hit an emptiness where the mind link used to live. I didn't flinch. None. He tasted the air the way an alpha can, probing layers, pine, creek, iron, and the wrong rain from the blue cloak they had stripped away. His mouth thinned, not at me, at the interference. You smell of Blackclaw, he said, and of something you didn't choose. Both accurate, I said. Reese clicked his tongue once. Kaelin raised a hand. Who hunts you? Men who are fond of orders they don't sign, I said. I steadied my hands against the urge to fold them. And a woman who likes to arrange the world into mirrors. Metaphor is lazy armor, Kaelin said. No real heat in it. A test. True, I said. She prefers glass you can cut with. The corner of his mouth moved, not enough to be called a smile. He paced to the window slit and looked out at his valley. The set of his shoulders told a story I knew even before the ring cord brushed his collarbone. Loss had carved him into something functional, not pretty, lasts in weather. His wolf pressed against him from inside. I felt it the way one feels thunder in the ribs. A name hovered. Rook. The shape of a bird that watches battlefields and returns with news no one wants. He listened to it for a breath and then nodded to whatever it said. If you lie to me, I will know, he said when he turned back. If you bring a war to my door, I will put it back where it came from, hard. I won't lie, I said. And if trouble finds me here, I'll walk before it spills into your yard. Not how Refuge works, Reese muttered, almost to himself. Kaelin's glance cut him off gently. He came closer, not crowding. Close enough to read skin, to count nights without sleep. His gaze dropped once, briefly, to the place where my palm hovered when I forgot to command it not to. He didn't ask. Not yet. What do you want, he asked, other than not to be found? A roof until I can earn one, I said. Work. I work. Doing? Whatever keeps a place like this standing, I said. I know stores, herbs, rationing, wards. I can repair a seam and a boundary and a mind sometimes. I cook. Poorly unless you like stews that apologize for being stews. The humming healer snorted softly at the hearth. We've eaten worse than apologies. Kaelin's head tipped the smallest degree. You don't ask for coin. I'll take food, I said, and sleep, and the right to leave when leaving is wiser. He walked around me once, not predatory, evaluating the way a smith clocks a blade for faults. When he stopped, we stood almost shoulder to shoulder, both facing the exit. People speak truer when not looked at head on. You know our name, he said. You know we don't posture. You know we don't bow to crowns we didn't vote for." "I know you hold your lines," I said. "Iron doesn't argue. It fixes. Or it warps." His breath eased. "You can stay on conditions. Go on. You tell the truth when asked. You work. You carry no messages for enemies I haven't named yet. And you don't use metaphor when a plain word will keep my people alive." "Agreed." He nodded at the healer. "Malin, see to her needs." "I'm not injured," I said. The words came out too fast. "Just tired. I'll be fine." Malin's song shifted key again, amused. "People who say they're fine usually break the fine on the way to the door. Sit. Let me look without prodding." Shame tried to climb my throat. I tucked it into my ribs beside Vesper. "Not guilt," she said. "Assessment. He's asking if you can stand among his people without falling on them. It's fair." "I appreciate the caution," I managed. "I can stand. I will." Kalen watched my face while I said it. Something in his eyes softened a grain. "There's stew," he said. "We're famous for onion and regret." "Your captain already promised water with iron in it," I said. "Why not stew with regret?" Reese's tongue clicked again, once. Habit. I found it oddly reassuring. For the first time since the gates had shut behind me, the knot between my shoulders loosened a little. Relief didn't feel like joy. It felt like cold fingers thawing prick by prick until you want to curse the return of sensation. I set the urge aside. Rest was not safety. Safety was the thing you paid for daily. I did not tell him who I had been. I did not say Luna out loud. The word might sprout ears, and I could not explain the torque burnt into my palm without also explaining a crown I no longer wore. I was a woman with nothing but a stubborn wolf and a futured midwife. That was enough story for now. Kalen's gaze went to the doorway as a runner appeared there, breath quick, hair plastered to his skull with sweat. He hadn't shifted back long enough to fully rehearse human shapes. "Alpha," he said. "Ridgehorn, twice. Standard signal for parlay, I think." Reese's jaw went tight. The little click didn't come. Silence, like a hand flattening a map. "Whose banner?" Kalen asked. "Blackclaw," the runner said, swallowing. "Silver background, the king's personal mark." Heat left my hands. Vesper's ears went back. "They came fast," she said. "Too fast for morning after a night like that, unless they were already moving." Kalen looked at me then, not accusing, measuring the size of the stone I had rolled into his path. "If you have something to tell me," he said quietly, "tell it now, before my answer fixes more than you meant to break." I opened my mouth. The words I had kept like knives behind my teeth knocked against each other, looking for order. Behind the runner, beyond the door, the ridge horn sounded again, closer now, a rawer note, as if the mouth that blew it had blood in its teeth. Months later, I labored in a storm that seemed determined to pull the roof down with its teeth. Wind took the eaves in both hands and shook. The longhouse answered with an old groan. Malin's hum braided through the noise, steady as a pulse. "Breathe here," she said, palm warm on my back. "Not up in your throat, love. Down where it matters." I tried. Sweat cooled, then returned. Time broke into rooms I kept walking through and couldn't name. Between them, Vesper pressed her muzzle under my ribs, lending me the quiet of snowbound woods. "Stay with me," she said. "We open the door, not the sky." Footsteps stopped at the threshold. Kalen's shadow filled the frame and then shortened when he bowed his head, as if the room's simple dignity required it. He did not cross the line. His wolf, the watchful one I had named Rook in my head, peered through his eyes and kept its distance. "Do you need anything?" he asked Malin. His voice had the mild scrape of stone on stone. "A miracle would be nice," she said, not looking up. "Barring that, hot water, clean cloth, and you standing in the hall, not in the doorway." "I can stand," he said, and went to fetch both miracle and water. Reese passed once with a bundle of kindling, clicking his tongue under his breath, habit keeping time against fear. Someone stuffed fresh moss between the logs. The longhouse smelled of smoke, iron kettles, rain blown in where it shouldn't be, and something bright I had no name for because I had never owned it before. Expectancy that did not ask permission to exist. "Again," Malin said, and I did. The room fractured and reformed. I gripped the edge of the bed frame until my knuckles paled. Vesper took some of the weight and left me enough to do the rest. "Good," she murmured. "Push like you hate the door but love what waits." Between contractions, I drifted. The mind link that had once sung in my bones was gone, severed clean when I stepped through Blackclaw's gates. Iron Fang's link ran nearby like a river behind a wall. I could hear its pressure, but not its water. It felt honest to be outside it. It also felt like winter. When the pain crested again, the world narrowed to a line I had to cross or die straddling. I crossed. A cry tore out of me and took something with it. Then there was silence like a room catching its breath, and then a smaller sound, wet and offended, alive. "Hello," Malin said to the air, voice going foolish, which is how love enters a place without breaking furniture. "Hello, fierce thing." I didn't know I was crying until my mouth filled with salt. They placed a small, furious body on my chest, and he was heat. He was gravity. He was the most persuasive argument I had ever heard for the world continuing. I touched his back in tiny, unbelieving circles, memorized the map my fingers made. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a little mouth that found what it wanted without instruction. "What's his name?" Malin asked softly. I looked down, and whatever answer I had planned, the one that would have made distance easy, melted like hoarfrost. "Kieran," I said, the syllables a promise. "Kieran Veyra, I swear." My voice ran out. I tried again. "I swear you will not be fed lies as milk. You will be nobody's shield story. You will grow where no one can rewrite your bones." Vesper's pride rolled through me like warmth from a banked fire. "Mine," she said, awed. "Ours." The door lintel took a light knock. Kaelin's voice from outside, kept low, as if noise might startle whatever gods were listening. "All well?" Malin's eyes shone in the lamplight. "Well," she said, "sound as a bell, mother, too." "May I?" He cut himself off, made a soft sound that was not quite a laugh. "No, I can wait." He could. He stood there for an hour, then another, as Malin set stitches and tied what needed tying, and taught me how to pivot my body into a new life without splitting it open again. Reese left broth by the door and went away with his click muted. A girl with ash on her nose brought a wooden fox she had whittled poorly. Its ears were too big. She left it on the stool without looking at me and ran. The gift warmed the air more than the brazier managed. When they let Kaelin come to the threshold, he stepped in with care, as if the boards might object. He set a bundle of pine and juniper at the hearth that snapped and gave the room a better smell. He did not look at the space where a man might have stood at my side. He looked at Kieran as if taught by grief how to approach a blessing without spooking it. "He has strong lungs," he said. "He has opinions," I answered, and felt a smile take the corner of my mouth as if it had been waiting there all along. Kaelin's gaze flicked to me, then away. Good. Opinions keep wolves alive. He didn't ask the question sitting in the room like a guest who had arrived too early. Whose child? Which blood? I was grateful for the reprieve and afraid of it too. Reprieves accrue interest. Days, or pieces of day gathered between feedings and sleep, trickled by. Siren learned the shapes my arms preferred to hold him. My body relearned balance with this new weight to consider. Malin moved around us with the brisk tenderness of a woman who had seen every version of survival and did not find any of them embarrassing. She taught me the herbs Iron Fang used for strength, for soreness, for sleep that didn't tip into the wrong dark. People came and went, careful with their eyes. Cautious acceptance found a chair and sat. No one asked me to pay for being alive with stories I wasn't ready to spend. On the fourth night, the wind died. The longhouse listened to itself breathe. Kieran drowsed at my breast, lashes making small commas on his cheeks. He opened his eyes, hazel like mine, and for one flicker of a heartbeat, a thin ring of gold sparked around the iris, so faint anyone else might have blamed the lamp. The world tilted a degree. Vesper froze, then pressed close. "Don't move," she said, pointless and true. The spark went and left Hazel. My skin kept the memory like a brand. I tried to breathe through the knowledge and found the air narrow. Kalen came by with a ledger, an excuse as transparent as light. He looked at Kieran and not at me. The ring at his throat hung still. "We are adjusting ration lines," he said, as if a ledger could build a wall between blood and consequence. "Children come before soldiers." "Thank you," I managed. His gaze skimmed my son's face and for a split second caught the afterburn of what I had seen. Something tightened along his jaw. Not accusation, mathematics. "Whose eyes, Mira?" Malin asked later, gentle as a knife wrapped in wool. "A traveler's," I said too quickly. I stared at the wall so I wouldn't stare at my lies. "It doesn't matter." "It will," she said. Not unkind, but not yet. That night I slept and woke to a sound that raised the hairs along my forearms before my mind named it. Not the ridge horn, not a knock. A distant layered calling threaded through the valley like a rope pulled hand over hand. Wolves answering a signal beyond words. Iron Fang's mind link tightened, cords drawn taut. I could not hear its speech, only feel its pressure, urgent now. Reese's stride passed the longhouse in 3 long beats. I stood, swayed, tucked Kieran tighter into the crook of my arm. Vesper's head went up inside me, alert. "Listen." The calling came again, closer, and the wardstones buried at the 4 corners of the settlement answered with a dull, sympathetic thrum, as if something outside had knocked in a pattern they recognized. Kalen's silhouette filled the doorway a breath later, haloed by cold air. He didn't step in. He didn't need to. His eyes were already on my son. "They've found a way to the valley without our leave," he said quietly, "and they're using a king's key. Years taught us new shapes. I became the woman who kept Iron Fang's pantry honest, its ward lines humming, its wounded anchored. Sieran became motion and discipline. He grew out of blankets and into the yard, into a body built for the clean lines of speed. Black hair with a silver streak that caught sun like a blade, hazel eyes that watched and measured. Sometimes, in certain light, a filament of gold flickered around his iris and was gone before I could name it. "Not yet," Vesper would murmur. "Do not borrow storms." "Again," I told him, and he rose from the dust without complaint. We trained with ash poles on the south terrace because the wind there cut bad habits clean off. His stance was good, wrists loose, feet alive. He lunged. I turned his momentum and tapped his ribs. He grinned through his breath, then corrected faster. Kalen watched from the shade with the patience of a tree that had learned to stand through winters. He said little. When he did, it was the word that mattered. "Left heel," he said once, a shade dry. "It believes it can wander." Kieran anchored it. "Better?" "Better," Kalen said. Rook, his wolf, moved behind his eyes the way a crow crosses a field. "There." Vesper noted inside me, amused. "He pretends to be a fence. He is a watchtower." We trained more than muscle. In evenings, when the heat bled out of the rock, I set stones on the map table in the hall and asked questions instead of giving orders. "If a patrol is cut off beyond this ridge," I said, "and you cannot outpace the enemy, what buys you time that steel does not?" "Their certainty," he said without hesitation. "Break it. Split your runners. Light 3 fires in the wrong valley and whistle to the right one in a pitch they cannot follow." Rhys clicked his tongue from the doorway, approving despite himself. Malin hummed low without looking up from her mending. The pack had learned to let me teach without asking where I had sharpened the edge. Kaelin never asked in front of anyone. He did not step into the space a father might have occupied. He stood beside it, made sure it did not collapse on us, and when Kieran dozed at the table after too long a day, Kaelin would lift him with the easy care of a man who remembered how to carry both grief and weight. He never lingered. He never crossed the line of what I could accept. He simply returned the boy to my arms and left the room with one hand skimming the rough edge of the doorframe, as if the wood might offer him counsel. Iron Fang's mind link held the valley like a net under a tightrope. I could feel its pressure now, a steady presence, but I could not speak into it. Kieran could. Born under these roofs, he slid into that current as his senses found their shape. The first time the Alpha's voice brushed his mind, he startled and glanced to me, boy and wolf listening at once. "Breathe," I told him. "Answer as Iron Fang taught you." He did, efficient, respectful. There was pride in me, and there was the small winter of being left on the far bank of a river my son could cross. I wrapped both in linen and put them in the same drawer. We stitched ourselves to the pack in small, ordinary ways. Siren brought wood without being asked, mended straps for the stables, returned a dropped coin to a woman who swore it had been 2. He began to run drills for younger pups, made them laugh, made them listen. The men who had met me at the ridge stopped watching for a reason to refuse us and started watching to see how far the boy would go. "Leadership is a temperature," I told him as we scrubbed the yardstones after a rain. "You raise it by degrees, not with a torch." He nodded, dark hair plastered to his forehead, eyes bright. "Degrees," he echoed, then made the younger ones chant it like a game until the word lost its edge and became a habit they could carry without nicking themselves. Once, under low clouds, his eyes flashed gold long enough for me to be certain. It was a ring, thin as a coin's edge, and when it faded, my palms were damp. He did not notice. I turned my face to the wind and let the fear move through me so it would not set up house in my bones. Kaelin saw something that day, not the gold, the hush that followed it. He came beside me without speaking and stood back to back, as if there were an enemy to surround. Rook pressed lightly in his gaze. "Say nothing," Vesper said, agreeing for once with a wolf that was not mine. "Not until the field is chosen." Iron Fang taught Kieran the forest like scripture. How to read the tilt of a fern, the fresh chalk of a hare's tooth on bark, the silence that means a hawk is hunting. He learned to shift in short bursts at first, under Malin's eye and with me watching the set of his breath. His wolf slept deep, then stirred in dreams, then pressed his nose against the seam of the world without pushing through. "What will you call him when he wakes?" Kieran asked one night, drowsing under a blanket that had seen better winters. "He will tell you his name," I said. "You will say it once and never by accident." He grinned. "You and your riddles." "I am saving you from bad poetry and worse decisions." He laughed, then fell asleep with his mouth open and his hand fisted in the fringe of the blanket, and I watched the slow rise and fall of his chest until Vesper nudged me toward my own bed. I refused to let closeness creep where it would only be hungry. Kaelin's steadiness was a tide. I did not wade. When he stood too near, I thanked him and took a step aside. When he offered a cup, I took it by the handle, not his fingers. He did not push. He simply stayed, and sometimes that was the harder thing to endure. War murmured at the margins like a gossip who knew how to keep a secret until it paid. Scouts returned with reports of Blackclaw runners near the old creek bed. Nothing that breached treaty, enough to set teeth on edge. Reese's click picked up tempo. Malin laid extra bundles by the door. The watchtower horns stayed quiet, but their silence felt coiled. "Teach me the map of their mind," Kieran said quietly one evening, both of us studying the markers for the 5th time. He never called Blackclaw by name. He had learned that from me. "They love straight lines," I said. "They call it strength. We will use angles." "Angles," he said, and placed 3 pebbles in a chevron that turned a narrow path into a funnel. Clever boy. Dusk folded over the valley like a careful blanket. We ended drills late and walked the terrace to let sweat turn to salt, listening to the last thuds of practice axes. The ward stones at the 4 corners of the settlement thrummed, a soft, familiar reminder that we were inside a circle drawn with stubborn hands. Kieran stopped, head tilted. A different tone threaded the link, one I could not hear, only see in him. His pupils expanded, then narrowed. He flinched, the smallest fraction, as if a bird had flown up in his chest. "What is it?" I asked. "Nothing," he said automatically, then frowned. "No, not nothing. A knocking. Like someone speaking from far underwater." Vesper lifted her head so fast the motion snapped along my nerves. "He is close," she whispered. "He is at the door." Kieran pressed a hand to his sternum and went very still. When he spoke, his voice was not quite his alone. "Bracken," he whispered, wonder and fear stitched together. He said his name is Bracken. The wardstones hummed again, louder this time. Far off toward the ridge, a horn cut the dusk in 2 short calls, the Iron Fang signal for movement at the border. Kaelin strode from the hall at the same moment Reese broke into a run. The Alpha's gaze found my son first, then me. Rook looked out and did not blink. "Inside," Kaelin said, calm but already turning toward the slope. "Now." Kieran's eyes caught the last of the light. For one heartbeat, gold-ringed hazel like a promise coming due. Iron Fang taught me how to live without noise. Days braided into useful things, mending harness, counting grain, setting the wards to sing low and honest. Between them, I watched a boy become a blade. Kieran ran the southern ridge with the older patrols now, measured his breath, checked his feet. When he returned, he set his bow down gently, as if it were an animal he respected. Sometimes he looked at the tree line and listened to something I could not hear. "He'll be taller than Kaelin by spring," Vesper said, amused, "and cockier if we let him." "Degrees, not torches," I reminded her and my son both. Kaelin moved through the days like a man who had bargained with winter and collected on the deal. He spoke little. His steadiness did the speaking. If grief had carved him, time had sanded the edges. Sometimes I'd catch him at the hall window where the valley narrows, brow lined not with worry but with concentration, as if he were reading the wind itself. He learned my rhythms without asking for them. In the evenings he brought tea that tasted faintly of juniper and set it within reach, not pressed into my hand. When I checked the wardstones, he walked 2 paces behind and to the left, close enough to intercept trouble, far enough to let me pretend I did not need intercepting. Once, when I fumbled a bandage on my own wrist after a training misstep, he took the linen, turned my hand palm up, and bound it with square, competent movements. "You could have asked Malin," he said, a hint of dry humor. "She enjoys scolding more than I do." "She hums while she scolds," I said. "It puts my pride in a cradle and rocks it too long." His mouth tipped. He tucked the tail of the bandage under with a small nudge of his thumb. Warm skin, steady hands. I felt the line of that touch for an hour after he left, and I hated that I noticed. Rook watched me from the amber of Kaelin's eyes and kept his counsel. He is a patient wolf, Vesper murmured. He would court you like a winter sun, show up every day until you forget the cold. I won't, I told her. I remember what frost can do to a field. Kaelin never spoke of his Luna, unless the valley demanded it, when he invoked her name to steady a widow or a child, but his quiet carried the shape of that absence, and sometimes grief recognizes itself in the shadows of another and nods. We became a pattern. On market days, we circled the lanes together, listening to small complaints, smoke gone sour, an old roof buckling under thaw. Kaelin would fix with labor what others tried to fix with orders. Once a cart axle cracked, and before the owner could gather apologies, the Alpha had his shoulder under the weight while I wedged a stone and Reese fetched the spare. Reese clicked his tongue, as always, keeping time with the moment. It soothed the horses. It soothed me. War started as whispers, scouting blurs near the old creek bed, a broken snare that wasn't ours. Twice we found prints that liked straight lines too much. Blackclaw men tended to translate landscape into geometry. Iron Fang favored angle and curve. At supper one night, Sieran set his bowl aside and glanced toward the door without moving his head. Bracken says the north timberline smells wrong, he said, low, almost surprised at himself, like sap turned to varnish. Words for instincts make them teachable, I said. Good. Kaelin's gaze shifted to me, a flicker. We'd been careful around the bright hazard of the boy's gold-flecked eyes. He, too, was careful. He looked for a father in maps and in rules, not in men's faces. I made sure of that. Later, on the terrace, Kaelin stood beside me while the valley shrugged itself into dusk. I'm told you've been teaching the youth how to argue with terrain, he said. Terrain doesn't argue, I said. It waits for you to learn. A pause. His hands settled on the stone parapet, Scar catching the last light. I would like to invite you, he said, then stopped as if the words were a horse he did not want to startle. There's a winter market in a fortnight. Music, if we can bully a fiddler out of the hills. Come with me. And Kieran, of course. My heart did something small and unhelpful. We'll see, I said, softening the refusal with a smile that felt almost like the one I used to know. If Malin isn't hoarding me in the infirmary for inventory. Malin can spare you, he said mildly. She hoards jars, not people. I don't... The words caught on old bone. I don't walk beneath lanterns for joy anymore, Kaelin. He nodded once, as if he'd expected the shape of it. Another time, then. No injury bled into his voice, only acceptance. Somehow that made it worse. We walked the ward line that night. He listened to the stones. I listened to him listen and to the silence beyond them. Storms build like gossip, quiet hooks, little barbs, a weight you don't notice until your coat won't hang straight. On the third pass near the tumbled hawthorn, the wind shifted. A note slid in under the honest smells of iron and ash and turned my stomach, not for what it was, but for what it remembered. Hothouse flowers, rain that had never fallen here. I stilled. Kaelin did too, though I hadn't spoken. Rook came forward so sharply I felt him in my teeth. You know it, Kaelin said. Yes. My mouth tasted of an old betrayal. It's painted, it clings. We found the source at the base of the hawthorn, twine woven with a sliver of opalescent thread and a bead the size of a tear. It looked like nothing. It smelled like my blue cloak from a life ago. Kaelin crouched and didn't touch. Witchcraft? Not the old kind, I said. Alchemy with a liar for a teacher. Blackclaw? Blackclaw doesn't waste scent on borders, I said. They waste steel. But this is someone who wants to walk ahead of steel and soften ground. Solara's face stepped up in my mind like a foot onto a throat. I breathed once, put it back in the dark. Kaelin rose. For a fraction of a second, his hand lifted toward my arm, then fell. "Reese," he called over the link, quiet and carrying. "Bring a jar, and the tongs you hate." The captain arrived with glass and distaste. Click. "Nasty bit of nothing," he muttered, squinting. "Feels like a prank." "On wolves," Kaelin said, flat. We bottled the bead, and the wind seemed to sigh with relief. I rubbed my thumb over my palm where the torque had burned once. Old metal, old law, new lies. Back at the hall, while Malin fetched salt to cleanse the lintel, Kaelin stood close enough that I could feel the heat of him, not touching, a presence. "You do not have to patrol every line yourself," he said quietly. "I prefer to know which doors I'm asking others to keep," I said. "And I prefer you to ask," he said, then exhaled as if the air had been stubborn. "You don't have to stand alone here, Mira." "I'm not alone," I said, more defensive than I meant. "I have a son." "Who is not a wall," he said. No reproach, a fact. The lamplight gilded his scar. I looked away first. "Another time, Kaelin." He nodded. He always nodded. He did not push the door. He stood near it, patient, letting me hear the wind outside, until I chose to open it myself. If ever. Reese returned with the jar sealed and his tongue clicking faster. "Found 2 more on the west run," he said. "Same stink. Whoever's planting them has a sense of humor and a short life expectancy." "Set double watch," Kaelin said. Quietly. No panic. I went to Kieran's cot. He slept hard, mouth slack, the line of his jaw sharper this month than last. Bracken stirred under his skin, a restless dog in a dream. "I don't like the wind," the young wolf whispered, not fully awake. "It's wearing someone else's fur." "I know," I whispered back, though he couldn't hear me in the way he heard Kaelin. I smoothed his hair, careful of the spiking cowlick he refused to cut. The future lay there, warm and oblivious, and I realized I was afraid in the old way, afraid of being wrong in front of a child who believed me infallible. The horn at the outer tower split the valley. 2 calls. Pause. 2 again. Movement at the border. Kaelin was already turning, shoulders set. Reese swore softly, click lost under the sudden surge of feet. Malin's humming died. I reached for my boots, and as I laced them, the scent rolled in from the ridge on a clean, unbroken wind. Hothouse flowers, rain that belonged to someone else. And beneath it, unmistakable this time, the salt-bright edge of a banner I had kissed, once and would not touch again. Blackclaw was here. Horn split the valley before the sun had the courage to climb. 2 calls, a pause. 2 again. Movement at the border, clean as a blade laid on a map. I was already lacing my boots. Sieran stayed very still, listening to a current I could not enter. His pupils widened, then steadied. "Bracken?" I asked the space between us. "Here," his wolf answered from somewhere just beneath my son's skin, young and sure. "We run." "Slow," I said, palm to his shoulder. "Fast comes after clear." He nodded and was gone, taking the steps in 3 silent drops, a length of shadow with purpose. Iron Fang woke like a body whose nerves know their work. Reese's tongue clicked a rhythm that moved men into lines without the need for shouts. Malin handed out bandages and warnings with the same brisk affection. Kaelin crossed the yard with his long, measured stride. Rook steady behind his eyes. He did not need to raise his voice. The pack's link carried him like a conductor's hand. I felt it as pressure more than sound, a river against a dam. I went to the ward stones. The 4 set at the corners of the valley thrummed under my palms, voices deep as earth. I fed them salt in a ribbon of my breath. The power rose, not to fight, but to hold. "North Fork," Reese reported. Breath, even though he had run hard. "Scouts first, not hungry enough to be honest." Click, a dozen, perhaps more behind. "Angle them," Kaelin said. "No straight lines. Give them a reason to doubt their boots." Kieran took his squad to the low ridge where bracken grows thick as a rumor. He did not look back for permission. He had learned that from me. He had learned the patience to deserve it from Kaelin. I climbed the east parapet. From there, the land unrolled in folds, scrub, stone, the dark thread of the creek. The first Blackclaw scouts appeared between junipers, moving with the geometry I knew too well. Lines, angles, a belief that will could make the earth agree. They wore our winter like borrowed fur. Behind them, shapes flickered where the fog held its breath, reluctant to show what followed. "Keep the count without keeping the fear," Vesper murmured. "Name only what we can touch." The first clash sounded like wood breaking. Iron Fang pushed from the flank where we had left deliberate gaps in the scrub. Not a trap, an invitation to an error. Siren flowed with his runners, not ahead of them and not behind, placing bodies where force needed to be, not where glory would show. He used the land like a second weapon. When a Blackclaw spear came high, he went low, turned the force with his shoulder, and sent the man's balance to the stone. 2 breaths later, he was elsewhere, calling not with his mouth, but across the link, quick and clean. "Cross," Malin said behind me, eyes on the field and hands already full of what the aftermath would require. "They've trained the left side to lag. See how their bows answer a beat late." "I see it," I said, though my gaze kept finding the line of my son's neck, the way decision sat there like a promise and a warning. Arrows clattered against the low wall, contemptuous rather than convinced. Iron Fang returned a neat handful in reply, enough to say we were awake. No one whooped. No one bared their teeth for the pleasure of the noise. Even fighting, these wolves disliked waste. A Blackclaw runner broke from the main advance, trying to curl around the creek. Siren cut him off with 2 of his juniors, then feinted retreat. When the man followed, they turned together, bracken pushing up under my son's skin with a flash of gold in his gaze that only the steep angle of sun let me catch. Then it was gone, and Kieran's voice was all human again, directing the younger pair to sweep left and upend a pile of brush we had arranged days ago to look accidental. It didn't fall. It rolled. 6 snarling branches at ankle height where confident feet expected air. 3 Blackclaw went down in cursing tangle. No blood. Enough bruises to make memory. Kaelin's head tipped, accepting the move. "Good," he said across the link, a single word that turned the pack's temperature up by a degree. Siren did not look toward the hall. He kept his eyes where they belonged, and his hand lifted once, palm open. The signal for hold. His runners set their heels and held. The second wave hit harder. They always do. Steel rang. Wolves shifted, not fully, but along the edges. Nails, teeth, speed, using what the bodies could borrow without breaking law or sense. Iron Fang gave ground where ground meant nothing and took it back where it minted advantage. We lost a boy to a strike that caught wrong on his forearm. Malin's hum changed key, and he walked himself off the field with his jaw set, a stain spreading on his sleeve like a lesson. 2 of ours did not walk. We carried them. I told their names to the ward stones, because names deserve stone and air. The valley listened. It hurt the right amount, which is to say, it hurt. I found the scent of the wrong rain again in the churned mud near the creek. A bead lay half ground into the bank, opalescent thread winking. I bottled it with tongs, the glass clinking too loud against my own breath. "Alchemy," I told Reese as he passed. "Or something that wants to call itself that, not ours." He clicked, grim. "Then let us send it home in pieces." Kieran turned the fight with a choice that would have looked like luck if you didn't know him. He sent a pair up the scrub slope to light a string of small fires that were more smoke than flame, then used the distraction to slide a third of his runners through the seam between 2 boulders where only a boy raised on this valley would think a body could go. Blackclaw looked where smoke told them to. Iron Fang arrived where nobody had invited them. In another breath, the creek bank belonged to us again. "Hold," Kaelin said, then added, "For my son alone, not caring that we heard it, not making a secret of measured praise. Well done." Kieran stilled as if the words were a weight he needed to place properly. He nodded once, the smallest fraction. Then he moved on. He had learned where to put his pride so it would not turn to glass. When it ended, it did not end clean. Skirmishes rarely do. They smear out into the kind of silence that lets breaths be counted. We gathered the wounded. We rolled the bead between glass and gloved fingers until Malin took it with a disapproving sniff. "Without manners," she said, meaning whoever had planted it, and carried it away like a naughty child. We stripped a token from a fallen scout's belt, wax impressed with the Blackclaw royal sigil. Not unusual. What shivered along my skin was the second mark on the back, faint and deliberate. A smaller seal, a personal signet I knew too well. The curve at the base, the half-sun flare, thorns. My hand stayed steady by some miracle. I wrapped the token in cloth and passed it to Kaelin without comment. His thumb found the secondary impression, and for a flick of a moment, Rook bared his teeth inside him. Then both wolf and man banked the heat. "Parley!" Rhys called from the tower, voice flat. The horn followed. One call, longer, then a second, rising. The king's banner at the ridge. Kieran looked up from where he was tying a sling on a man's arm. The light caught his eyes wrong, and just for me, gold circled hazel like a secret, lighting a path it should not. He did not notice. He finished the knot, patted the man's shoulder, and stood. Kaelin set the token on the table between us like a piece that changes the game. He did not look at me. He did not need to. We both understood that a straight line was coming to argue with our angles. "Ready the hall," he said quietly. "We receive him at sunset." I could taste the inevitable in the air, bright as salt. "He will scent the boy," Vesper said. "No drama in it, only weather." "And I will stand," I told her. From the ridge, the banner lifted in the wind, a slash of silver that had once been my home. Sunset poured a thin copper line along the ridge. The king's banner cut it, silver against the bruised sky, then folded and rose again, as if the wind had decided to kneel and thought better of it. I stayed in the shadows of the longhouse gallery, where the rafters kept secrets and the wardstones hummed at the edge of hearing. Kaelin's order had gone out across Iron Fang's link an hour before. Calm, formal welcome, no spectacle. His voice traveled like a plumb line. I felt it as pressure against my skin but could not answer it. That was its own kind of loneliness. "You don't have to stand in the dark," Vesper said. "Good wolves are watching the light." "I'm not hiding," I said, and listened to my own lie go still on the floor. "I'm selecting angles." Riders crested the slope and spilled into the valley with the contained force of a wave that knew the reef. Blackclaw had always liked theater, but they brought only a handful of guards. Thorne rode at the front on a gray that moved like a thought. Time had carved nothing from him. It had burnished. Raven hair tied back without vanity. Amber eyes scanning, marking, weighing. The set of his shoulders said command had become bone. For a breath, the years thinned, and I saw the man who had laughed under a hawthorn and stolen my breath with his certainty. Then the memory remembered itself. It turned and left. Iron Fang met them in lines that didn't pretend to be a crowd. Kaelin stood in the center, simple clothes, no rings, power built from use rather than polish. Rook watched through him, head tilted, as if the king were a puzzle a bird might steal a piece from. "Alpha Kaelin," Thorne said, voice carved smooth. "I come for words, not spoils." "Words can be more expensive," Kaelin said. "We'll try to keep the bill small." A tug at my sleeve. Malin, eyes slanted with warning. "You don't have to be here for this." "I'm not," I said. "I'm somewhere else that looks similar." Rhys whispered the bare bones of protocol. swords stayed sheathed. Men moved where lines had been drawn weeks ago for this exact scene. The two alphas entered the hall together, and the valley exhaled. I meant to stay out. I meant it like a vow. Then the wind snuck into the gallery and shoved my name ahead of me. Not with sound, with scent. Honey and iron and the barest salt. Blackclaw essence sharpened by the air. I froze. Vesper pressed close. "Stay," she said. "Stone that listens is less noticed than leaves that rustle." I might have. Until Kieran arrived to set the warriors in their stations along the inner yard. He moved like the blade we'd forged. Economy without apology. He spoke across the link and men obeyed, respectful, not deferential, a leader by degrees. Thorne was halfway to the hall's threshold when he saw the line form. He marked Kaelin first, then Reese, then the runners, and then my son, because you could not see him when the light found his hair's thin silver streak and burned down it like a wick. Thorne's breath altered by less than a note. He turned his head the smallest degree. Varric lifted behind his eyes, a shadow stepping forward in a lit room. Kieran gave a signal, palm open, hold, and the line adjusted in a neat ripple. Clean, logical, familiar. Thorne's gaze sharpened, not at the gesture, at the set of the shoulders giving it, the angle of the jaw, the way a body resolves the argument between speed and strength. These are father questions you don't know you're asking until your bones answer. He took a step as if to pass, then stopped. He inhaled once, tasting the air. We are wolves. Scent writes on us more honestly than words. Wind slid across the yard and delivered what it had gathered. A clear thread that belonged to him and to me, and to a boy with a future amid iron. The truth was simple. It was also unbearable. For a heartbeat, Thorne was only a man who had found something he didn't know he had lost. The amber in his eyes flooded with light. Varric came forward in a rush, startled and ravenous, then slammed against the cage of pride and law, and too late. The moment passed through me like a fever breaking. I gripped the balustrade to keep my hands from lifting of their own accord. "No," Vesper said, firm, bracing me. "He is not your rescue, and you are not his ruin. Do not move." Kieran felt the attention without knowing the reason for it. He turned, puzzled, then let the question go when duty called it excessive. He didn't glance toward the gallery. He never did because I had taught him to lead without looking for the permission of my face. Kaelin saw everything. He didn't flinch. He didn't look at me. Rook hunkered down inside him, feathers tight against wind. The king's expression reassembled itself with ruthless skill, but small traitors remained. 2 deep breaths to file away the past, a flex at the hinge of the jaw. When he spoke, his voice had a burr. "Your youth drill well." "They drill," Kaelin said. "They listen, most days." Thorne's gaze slipped once more to my son, then away. He entered the hall. I flattened into shadow and wanted to peel my skin off and put on a simpler one. Negotiation was ceremony in plain clothes, water, not wine, iron cups, a map table without flourish. Thorne laid down a sealed parchment that smelled faintly of the same opalescent thread I had bottled yesterday. Solara's fingers lived in that wax. My mouth soured. Terms, the old dance. Borders to be clarified, patrol paths to be adjusted, an apology for rogue elements. Kaelin heard the words and weighed the intent. He met each request with a counteroffer that would keep the valley safe, and the cost visible. Reese stood at his shoulder as the hummingbird for details. I kept to the gallery's shadowed edge and tried to keep memory from narrating. Kieran entered halfway through to deliver casualty reports. He didn't step within arm's reach of the king. He spoke to Kaelin, crisp, respectful, a youth who had learned where his center was and how to guard it. Thorne didn't look at him at first. He listened. He nodded at Iron Fang numbers like a man accepting a bill. Then scent betrayed him again. It looped back. insistent, a rope thrown from another life. His head turned as if the air had tugged it. Amber met Hazel. The room emptied of noise I could hear. Ciaran's brow creased. Courteous confusion. The king's gaze moved over that face with the astonishment of a man reading his own handwriting decades later and realizing the letter had never been sent. Varric crashed against his bones. "Ours!" the wolf said, voice shaking with recognition and fury and a love it did not know what to do with. Thorne swallowed it like fire. The scent sealed what resemblance had argued. He knew. He knew as surely as the scar on his hand and the ring on his throat, not with proof a court might keep, with the proof wolves use when they hunt in the dark. Ciaran finished his report with a polite incline of the head, utterly unaware of the ground opening beneath him. He turned to go. "Wait," Thorne said, a thin crack in the iron, not a request. Ciaran paused. Kaelin's gaze flicked to me, then back. He did not intervene. Thorne stood. The movement wasn't dramatic. It shifted the room's weight anyway. He took one step forward, then another, as if approaching a cliff he had to see to believe. He breathed once, and the next words were a blade he had honed on 1,000 sleepless nights and never thought he'd use. "Whose son is he?" he demanded, voice low and terrible, eyes fixed on mine across the shadowed gallery. "Mira?" Silence thinned to a wire between us. I stepped out of the gallery's shadow because hiding would taste worse later. Light found the floorboards. It found my face. Thorne turned toward me as if the room had pivoted on a hinge. Vesper braced under my ribs. Steady, stone with breath. Ciaran stood a few paces off, poised between orders and questions. Kaelin did not move, but I felt him set himself. A quiet wall taking weight. Rook watched through his eyes, patient, unsentimental. "You would ask that here," I said, voice level, "before another pack, before a boy." Thorne swallowed a breath that scraped going down. "I would ask it anywhere," he said, "because the air will answer if you will not." His gaze flicked to Ciaran and back, as if looking at noon could blind a man. Varric paced behind his eyes like a caged storm. "He is Iron Fang," I said, "and he—" The word caught, then left his mouth as if it had been waiting years for a throat. "Smells of me." Ciaran's brow tightened. Polite confusion. Bracken stirred beneath his skin, a curious press against the seams of a life that had felt simple this morning. "Enough," Kaelin said, not loud. The room obeyed the sound of it. "We speak without circles, or we do not speak." Thorne dragged his gaze to him. "Your hospitality keeps a sharp edge." "It keeps my people breathing," Kaelin said. "If you want truth, ask it where truth can stand. Not in front of boys you may claim." The word landed. Claim. Vesper's hackles lifted. "No." "Side room," Reese suggested, tongue clicking once, twice. He already had the door open, a small courtesy that felt like a shield. We went. Ciaran stayed in the hall with Malin's hand on his sleeve and 1,000 unasked questions building a scaffolding in his eyes. He didn't look at me. He held himself still the way young wolves do when stillness is harder than a sprint. The side room was plain. A table, 2 chairs, a window cut to look at nothing but stone. Thorne did not sit. Neither did I. Kaelin stood a half step inside the threshold, not intruding, not leaving. He would witness. He would not referee. For a breath, we only listened to the muffled life of the hall. Boots, a cup settling, Reese's click counting seconds like beads. "You banished me," I said, because the floor needed a nail. "In public, for propriety, for unity. You named me compromised and stripped me to bone in a room that cheered the sound of it." He flinched, small, honest. "I know what I did." "Do you?" My hands wanted a wall. I gave them the table's edge. "You asked if I have a son. I do. I had him alone. I bled and mended without your name on my mouth, because names have teeth." Varric pushed. Thorne caught a breath like a man catching a blade. "You hid him from me." "You threw us into winter," I said. "There was nowhere to be from that did not freeze." He looked at the window as if stone might forgive better than I would. When he looked back, the years were on him, not as weight, but as a map of roads he should not have taken. "Say it plain, Mira, is he—" "He is his own," I said. Then, because a boy should not be made into a lesson, I did not make him one. "Yes." The word landed in him. He rocked a fraction, no more than a breath. Varric took one step forward and then sat hard, like a wolf ordered to heel in a burning room. He did not reach for me. He gripped the back of the chair and left fingerprints in old varnish. "How many years?" he asked, voice rough. "How many nights did you—" He broke off, rebuilt the sentence with fewer ruins. "You should have told me." "I tried," I said, and the old ache rose as if called. "At the gate, with the torque still on my throat, with your counsel watching for any motion they might read as guilt. You did not listen. You had someone whispering a prettier truth." His jaw nodded. "Selara," he said low, the name cracking like a thin plate. He didn't defend her. He didn't deny the shape of the lie. Pride found a corner anyway. "If I had known—" "You would have believed the version that hurt less," I said. "You always did." We stood in it. The bond we'd ripped still flickered like a nerve that misfires after amputation. Not a song, a phantom ache. It found the air between us and warmed it unpleasantly. "Do not let pained memory call itself love," Vesper warned. "It will wear your face to gain entry." Thorne closed his eyes for a heartbeat. When he opened them, something raw showed and tried to sit like a king anyway. I can't change what I did. I can do something about what comes next. "What comes next?" I repeated. "My son will not be raised as an enemy of his own blood." "He is not raised an enemy of anything," I said. "He is taught to see around corners." "Which you would call wisdom and I might call fear," he said. "Do you hate me so much you would deny him what I can give?" "I deny him nothing," I said softly. "I choose for him until he can choose for himself." Kalen shifted his weight once, stone acknowledging wind. He had not spoken. He had also not left. Rook watched every syllable as if language were a weapon that might misfire. Thorne looked at him, then back at me. "You think I have no right?" "I think rights that ride on old pain arrive on lame horses," I said, "and I won't put my son on one." The quiet stretched. It should have cooled things. It did not. Thorne set his palm flat on the table, as if to keep the earth from leaning. "Whatever I am to you now, coward, fool, king, I am still his father. The law gives me claim enough to demand proof." "Not here," Kalen said, finally using the weight he carried. "You don't swing your laws in my hall." Thorne didn't look away. "Then I ask without law. Let me speak to him, alone." Vesper rose inside me, hackles a prickling tide. "No." "No," I said aloud. "You don't get to write over his first knowing with your crown." Something in Thorne's expression gave. Not pride, not king. Man. "I smell him, and all I want is to—" He caught himself, shook his head once, hard. "I'm not here to beg." "No," I said, throat tight. "You never were." The door whispered and Kieran stood there, as if the room had pulled him the way storms pull birds. He looked at our faces. He didn't understand yet, but he understood enough to be wary. Bracken pressed against his skin, ears up, tail low. "Kalen asked for casualty tallies," he said to the air, formal. His eyes flicked to the king and away. Thorne could have hidden the ache if he'd had another second to build the mask. He didn't. Kieran saw pain in a man he'd been taught to name an enemy, and confusion opened his mouth, then closed it. He stepped back correctly and waited for the order that would let him leave with dignity. Kaelin spared him. "Thank you," he said. "Leave them with Rhys." Kieran nodded. He glanced at me once. I kept my face steady and wished I had gentler bones. Thorne followed the movement like a man follows the path a blown leaf takes after a fire. He turned back to me with decision gathering like weather. "Dawn," he said. "At the outer circle. I will ask again. If you deny me, I will bring witnesses and law." "You'll bring Solara's ink too?" I said. "Her beads? The wrong rain?" His jaw went still. It was the only sign I had landed anything. Rhys's click sounded once in the hall, fast and urgent. Malin's hum died mid-note. The air changed, iron picking up a note of glass. Kaelin's head snapped toward the door. "Rhys?" The captain's voice carried, tight. "Apologies, we swept the lintels twice. There's a third bead in the western eave. It wasn't there an hour ago." The wrong rain scent slid under the door like a smile. Vesper flattened her ears. "She is in the walls," she whispered, "and she knows he knows." The wrong rain returned before dawn. I woke to the faintest bloom of hothouse sweetness under the roofline, an ache in the air that did not belong to mountains. Vesper lifted her head, ears pricked, silent as stone that has learned to listen. "She's threading us again," my wolf said. "Glass in the mortar." I swung my feet to the floor and stood very still. Somewhere outside, Rhys's tongue clicked twice and stopped, the sound a quick blade put away. Kaelin met me at the threshold with his jaw set. Rook hovered in his eyes, tight-feathered. "West Eve," he said. "Third bead. Snuck in when we slept with one eye." "Not witchwork," I said. "Alchemy taught to mimic scent and scramble minds. It won't break the wards, but it will try to make our hands clumsy when it counts." He nodded once. "No surprise. No comfort." "We cut it out clean," he said. "Malin's salting the lintels." Iron Fang woke quietly. Boots, ropes, the murmur of a link that did not panic. Siren was already in the yard, hair damp from a wash too quick to be vanity. He rolled his shoulders, checking range, bracken restless under his skin, curious and ready. When his gaze caught mine, only for a breath, something like a question lived there. I smoothed it with a nod I hoped read as ordinary. "He'll need the plain truth," Vesper said. "After sunrise," I said. "After we survive sunrise." We weren't the only ones already awake. In the Blackclaw Keep, far from these ridges, Mira Veyra stood in a small room that had once been a storage closet and now smelled like a perfumer's sin. Bottles glinted on shelves. A coil of opalescent thread lay like a captive river in a glass dish. Her hands were steady in the lamplight. The rest of her shook in places people don't see, the pulse at her throat, the tiny tremor in her lower lip when no one watched. Fear gnawed in little, efficient bites. She'd sent a runner to the ridge yesterday to watch what the king's mask could not hide. The boy. The scent. Thorne's expression cracking and re-knitting wrong. The report had reached her fingers before her mind. She had crushed the parchment, then smoothed it, then crushed it again. The wolf inside her, sable, sleek and impatient, paced, tail lashing. "We warned him," Sable hissed. "We built him a wall, and he went to the window." Solara pressed opal thread to a bead, eyes narrowed, breathing through her mouth to keep from tasting the guilt she denied. "He will not have her," she whispered, to the room, to the mirror, to the shadow of a crown that never quite fit her skull. She reached for the mind link and let her voice cut like clean glass through the tangle of loyalists and bought men who circled her will. The link swelled and answered. Captains who owed their rank to her favors, mercenaries who liked their coin, heavy and their orders simple, a pair of royal guards who pretended honor until they counted the years ahead and chose a shorter path. "Pattern 2, she said into the bond, tone honeyed cruelty. Dawn, you will be given a key. You will say parley when you mean net. Obsession had burned out her caution. Each time she whispered, her voice carried a fraction too far, as if the link flinched from her. Back in Iron Fang, we pried a fourth bead from the northern eave and jarred it. Reese clicked, unhappy. "They breed in shadows," he muttered. "They breed in mines," I said. "Shadows are cheaper." The deal for dawn had been set last night. The outer circle where old stones shoulder the wind and nobody can pretend they didn't hear a promise. Thorne would stand there with Kaelin between law and war. He had asked to speak to me at sunrise. He had not asked to bring his counsel. I had intended to avoid that stone ring entirely and still be said to have kept my word. Fate has a way of disliking cleverness. We laid our own pattern, men along the rise in pairs, seen and unseen, runners with smoke pots and gravel in their pockets, no straight lines, nothing heroic. Siren checked the east approach with 2 juniors. He raised his hand and the boys ghosted along the scrub. He didn't look for me. He didn't need to. He was where he should be. And the ache that truth left in me would keep until winter. Kaelin stepped to my side without touching, the nearness that had become its own kind of vow. "He's good," he said. "He is," I said, because deflection would insult us both. Malin slipped a pouch of nettle and salt into my palm. "For your nerves," she said primly, "and for mine, by proxy." "I have no nerves," I lied, and tucked the pouch into my sleeve. Dawn light walked down the ridge. Thorne appeared where ground meets sky, not armored for battle, which is a message all its own. He had 3 with him, 2 guards and a slim figure in a traveling cloak, hood up, not Solara's style. She preferred eyes. The hood turned and, for a heartbeat, something of herb and smoke lifted on the wind that remembered other rooms. Kaelin's body altered by a fraction. Rook unfurled, then refolded. "He brings a witness," he said. "Or a leash," I said. Reese's click tightened. He lifted his fingers once, signal to hold, and Iron Fang breathed as one body that had learned restraint. We met at the stones. I still don't know why I stepped into that circle. Perhaps because running in front of a boy teaches him to run from his own bones. Perhaps because avoiding old ghosts only gives them longer legs. Thorne's gaze caught mine and did not let go. The bond between us was a burned wire, but even ash remembers the shape of flame. For a breath, my body remembered the weight of vows. Then the memory lost its teeth. "We will speak simply," Kaelin said. "Voice the measure that keeps instruments honest. You have concerns. We have borders. We will leave with both intact." Thorne's messengers had been careful. His scent was clean. The wrong rain was not on him. It lingered at the far edge of the circle like a grin pressed into fog. "First," Thorne said, not to Kaelin, to me, "he is mine. You will not deny him heir." "He is not an object," I said. "He does not fit in your language." Something flickered over his face. Shame, anger, the ache of a man who discovers his voice breaks in new places. "He is our son." "He is my son," I said quietly, then softer, because the truth can make you cruel if you forget to salt it. "And yours, if you can be better than the version of you that broke us." Kaelin didn't move. He didn't need to. I felt his steadiness the way you feel a wall hold when the wind tests the house. The figure in the cloak lifted their head a fraction, a woman's chin, a pale mouth pressed too flat. Not Selara, someone else, the scent of crushed mint under smoke. Vesper went still inside me, then bared her teeth. She put a hand in this. "Captain," Thorne said without turning, voice clipped. The right-hand guard stepped forward and held up a small object wrapped in cloth. A key. Old iron. The King's Passage. The way Solara's beads had opened the gates once before, my stomach tightened. "This stays in my hand," Thorne said to Kaelin, and it was nearly a promise. "Then keep it there," Kaelin said. "Use it and you lose the right to speak here." Wind rolled through the stones. Gyron shifted along the crest to watch the southern notch. Bracken nosed forward, curious, alert. In his eyes, for only me, a ring of gold flashed and was gone. A quick solar eclipse only a mother sees. Solara's net was already in motion. Her voice poured through the Blackclaw link. Those not here yet placed, those here named. Loyalists at the creek bed. Mercenaries ghosting the alder line with crossbows that smelled of oil and impatience. A handful of Iron Fang traders paid to look down at their laces until a signal came. She had laced the morning with threads only she believed she could see without tangling. "Now," Sable urged. "Pull." She smiled, sharp, private, and tugged the cord that would turn Parley into trap. A jay screamed in the bracken, too sudden, too loud. Reese's head snapped, his click turned knife sharp. "Down!" he barked into the link. Something sang past my cheek and broke against the standing stone. Glass, not metal. A bead shattered into opal stink. The wrong rain hit the circle like a lie shouted in a quiet church. For a heartbeat, the ward's song wavered. Across the stones, the hooded witness pushed her cloak back. Mint and smoke blossomed into the dawn. I knew that mouth, that clinical cool, the little twist it did when she thought she had solved a problem others were too sentimental to name. Selara smiled at me from beneath another woman's hood. "Loose," she whispered into the link I could no longer hear, and the valley answered with the first volley. Glass broke against stone and the air soured. The wrong rain spilled into the circle and turned breath into doubt. Solara threw her hood back, mouth curved like a knife she'd polished on other people's names. "Parley," she said sweetly, and the hills answered with bolts. Reese's voice cracked across Iron Fang's link. Down, scatter, angle. Kaelin moved first, pulling a guard with him behind a standing stone, then turning on a heel to take the measure of the valley. Thorne didn't flinch. He stepped into me, not at me, and our bodies chose the old geometry before the mind could argue. "Left," Vesper said. "Duck." I dropped. Thorne's arm crossed over my shoulder, and a bolt meant for my throat kissed the stone instead. We moved like we'd never learned to be strangers, two halves of a blade that remembered how it once fit its sheath. Varric pressed hot under Thorne's skin. Vesper rose in me like a tide. Our wolves didn't ask permission. They had fought together too long to pretend they needed it. "Northridge!" Thorne snapped to his guards, and before I could bristle at the order, he'd shifted a breath wider, nails catching light under human hands. He tossed me a second blade from his belt without looking. Old trust, old sin. I caught it anyway. The first line of mercenaries broke from the alder with all the subtlety coin can buy. Iron Fang's runners were already angling, not a straight line among them, smoke pots flaring where we'd planted them. Blackclaw loyalists, Solara's men, fired short, ugly bolts into the confusion, hitting our people and theirs. She wanted chaos. She didn't care whose blood bought it. "Kieran," I said into the open air because the link that held this valley didn't hold me. He didn't need my voice to find his work. He was already there, taking a squad along the creek cut, turning bodies with hand signals neat as a metronome. Bracken pressed against his skin, hungry for ground. Gold flickered at his iris, there then gone, a promise collecting interest. Kaelin slid in from our right, Rook silent and sharp behind his eyes. "Split the stone," he said, not to command us, to include us. He took the outer arc. Thorne and I took the throat. We met the first mercenary where the circle narrowed. Thorne caught his wrist, turned it, and I finished the motion with a heel sweep that sent the man rolling into his friend. Clean, efficient, nothing cruel. The second dragged a blade I didn't respect. I tapped his elbow and sent it elsewhere. Thorne's back touched mine, and we pivoted as if the floor remembered the pattern. Our wolves howled, hers inside me, his behind his teeth, and for a single hot breath, the burned wire between us sparked. Not tenderness, voltage. "Door," Thorne said, breath close to my ear. "Window," I returned, and we took both. On the ridge, Xirin did what I had taught and what Kaelin had hammered. He made terrain argue on his behalf. He fed fear small lies, smoke where the ground was solid, silence where feet expected noise, and then brought his runners through the seam none of us would have seen 20 breaths ago. He yanked an Iron Fang youth out from under a falling alder and sent him back to Malin with a shove and a joke that didn't quite land. He crossed a bolt meant for a Blackclaw guard who had not yet decided which oath to keep, took it on a bracer, and nodded once to the stunned man before moving on. Respect followed his heels from both sides, reluctant at first, then faster. Solara stood beyond the stones, with calm that belonged to someone who thought the rules were trapped under glass. Sable prowled in her gaze, tail a slash of impatience. She lifted a small flute to her mouth and blew a note too soft to be music. Around us, a scatter of her beads cracked where they'd been tucked into crevices and roots. Opal stink rolled the wrong way through the wind. For a moment, some of Iron Fang's lines stuttered. Hands half-slowed, eyes half-wet, the wards thrummed, bruised. Malin's salt burned clean along the lintels. The ward stones sang lower, steadier, and the fog slipped. "Hold the circle," Kaelin called, calm as a ledger. Reese's clicks stitched the order down the line. A Blackclaw loyalist lunged at Thorne with a snarl that didn't belong to a wolf, but to a man who had traded a conscience for a favor. Thorne met his eyes, and something like grief flickered through the amber. He didn't pull the strike. He turned it past his ribs, let the man's momentum take him, then knocked him flat with the bare edge of his forearm. The guard behind the loyalist looked shaken and young. "You don't have to choose badly," Thorne told him, too quiet for show, then shoved him toward the least dangerous mistake. We fought. The circle tightened, then breathed, then tightened again. I cut through a net of opal thread before it could fall on a pair of our youths. Vesper hummed in my bones, pleased and fierce. "Teach with your hands," she said. "He is watching." Kieran saw the gap opening near the hawthorn stump and didn't wait for permission. He took 3 and looped them low, came up behind a knot of mercenaries, and broke them open with speed and a kindness that would become legend. Blows that saved lives even as they ended fights. Bracken's voice lapped at the edges of his mind, eager, young, respectful. "Now? Now?" "Soon," Kieran told him without words, and placed a runner where I would have, not because I taught it, but because some things inherit. Solara's patience snapped a single hair at a time. She raised her hand, and the loyalists near the altar fired into the stone ring again, heedless of who stood there. A bolt sang past my arm and nicked the leather at Thorne's shoulder. He hissed, not pain, offense at incompetence. "Call them off," Kaelin said to him without looking, "or stand aside while we do it for you." Thorne didn't hesitate. His command cracked across Blackclaw's link so hard the air shook, "Stand down or stand alone," and half the disloyal men faltered. Selara spun, fury bright as polished bone. Sable slammed into her ribs. "Take the boy," her wolf urged. "Break her with the future." Selara signaled. 2 mercenaries broke toward the ridge, where Kieran was resetting his line. I ran before my brain could give me pictures I did not need. Thorne ran with me, stride for stride. We took different angles and arrived together, 2 teeth of the same trap. "Left," he said, "on 3. 2, I said, and went early. Surprise bought us a heartbeat. He didn't scold the tactic. He met it. Our blades moved in an argument that ended in agreement. The first mercenary went to ground, The second loosed a weighted net that glittered strangely in the new light, thread studded with opal beads. It opened above Kieran like a dark idea. "Down!" I shouted. He didn't duck. He leaped forward, under, dragging his junior with him, and rolling so the net fell where his legs had been. Quick, clever, not enough. The weights caught his boot, cinched, and in the same breath 2 more lines whipped from the brush, designed to snare a wolf mid-shift or a man at speed. Solara had planned this with a mapmaker's spite. Bracken surged under Kieran's skin, gold licking his eyes. He stilled, instead of tearing, the better choice a beat faster than panic. "Knife!" he snapped to his companion, voice level, and the boy slapped steel into his palm. We were already there. Thorne's hand closed on the line at Ciaran's ankle, mine on the knot near his knee. Our fingers brushed, heat and history sparking, and together we sliced. The net gave with a sound like a breath someone had been holding too long. Ciaran rolled free, came up in a crouch, and shoved his junior behind him as 3 more bolts sang at head height. I felt Thorne move and moved with him. Shoulder to shoulder now, we turned the volley at angles that sent it clattering uselessly into stone. The burned bond between us flared not tender, not forgiving, just bright. Raw power remembering its purpose. Varek's howl braided with vespers in my chest, and for a heartbeat I was 19 again, and the world had not yet learned to speak in the past tense. Kieran looked at us both. Something like wonder veined with suspicion in his face, then put his back to ours without asking why the air felt different. He didn't have time to. He saw a guard falter, seized the moment, and cut a path for an Iron Fang pair pinned near the stump. He hauled one to his feet with a grip that would leave a bruise, and, when the man tried to thank him, said only, "Run." Solara's cool snapped clean. She lifted her flute, blew another invisible note, and from the south notch, a new shape unfolded. Men with shields painted in royal silver, overlaid with a thinner, more private mark. Thorne's signet. Not his doing, her theft. Every head turned, every vow remembered itself. "Enough!" Thorne said, voice low. His gaze found Solara across the wrecked calm and did not blink. "Stand down." She smiled with all her teeth. "You first?" The men in stolen silver loosed as one. I saw their aim a fraction before they did. Not at Kaelin, not at Thorne, at my son. Vesper shoved at my ribs so hard it hurt. "Move." We did. Thorne and I. Same breath, same angle, blades up, bodies already between Kieran and the line of fire. The volley came, bright as a bad dream. And from the bracken behind us, as if the valley itself had decided the choice, another horn answered, close, sharp, urgent, followed by the unmistakable crack of a trap springing where no trap should be. The volley meant for my son never found him. The trap Reese had buried weeks ago sprang out of the bracken like a decision. Weighted saplings snapped their bindings and scythed into the air. Bolts cracked against green wood and fell like bad omens canceled mid-flight. Then the valley breathed again. Not calm, but the space after a scream. Iron Fang and Blackclaw pulled apart by inches, both bleeding and both unwilling to admit who had started dying first. Kaelin called Ahold with 2 fingers. Thorne barked orders down his link that burned. Solara was no longer at the stones. Her scent peeled away toward the alder line, mint and smoke, and that wrong rain she loved. We took stock. Malin's hum stitched the wounded into numbers. 2 dead on our side, 1 on theirs. A handful with new scars who would tell better stories than they had earned. In the muck near the hawthorn, we found a shield painted in royal silver, with a second signet pressed faintly at the rim. Thorne's mark stolen and stamped without leave. His mouth went thin when he saw it, the kind of thin that precedes ruin. The mercenary who had cast the net at Ciaran went to his knees when Reese hauled him in. "Coin," he spat, too fast. "Wasn't personal." Nothing is until it is, Reese said, and clicked once, unhappy. Who paid you? She did. He jerked his chin where Solara had been, said make it look like Iron Fang tasted her own lies, said the king wanted the boy taken quiet, said, he stopped, swallowed, said she'd sing to our heads if we missed. Malin pried a sliver of opal from the man's cuff with her tongs and dropped it in a jar with a sound like a tiny bell going out. There's your song, she said. A young Blackclaw guard, the one Thorne had shoved toward the least bad mistake, stepped forward with his face arranged to hide shaking. He pulled a crumpled cloth from his vest and unfolded it. Vial, thread, a bruise-yellowed scrap of parchment where a neat hand had written measures. She gave me these, he said, voice flat with shame. Said tuck one in a West Eve. Said the scent would make wolves stupid and easier to guide. I thought, you didn't, Thorne said, and the guard flinched. Then Thorne, softer, and you will, from now on. The kid nodded. Relief made him sway once. Captain Ivar appeared at the edge of the circle, as if the ground had delivered him. He still wore Blackclaw leather, dust on the knees where he'd taken a careless fall in the alder. He didn't ask permission to speak. Soldiers who have run out of lies seldom do. She came to me before the gathering, he said to Thorne, not looking at me, as if his eyes couldn't bear both truth and my face at once. Said to meet the Luna at the north gate past midnight. Said it would look improper. She rubbed something on the Luna's cloak before she sent it to the seamstress. I thought it was perfume. He swallowed. I am sorry. The world narrowed to a point, then widened past comfort. Thorne didn't bow his head, but something in him did. Varric made a noise a man should not have to make with other men listening. Affidavits, Reese said, low, to no one and everyone. Forged, beads, counterfeit shields, a parley mouth with a knife in it. Solara's lies layered and lacquered, each coat drying nearly invisible until you caught the light at the precise wrong angle. I pressed my fingers to my palm where the torque had burned once. The skin remembered heat. Thorne faced the valley. Hear me, he said across his link and the open air both. By my word as Alpha King, Mira Veyra is stripped of any claim to Luna or council. She is wanted for treachery and the manipulation of pact and bond. His voice shook once, not from weakness, but from the force required to hold steady. He looked at me then, and the years between stood up and asked to be excused. I broke us, he said. No crown in that sentence, just a man. I believed a story because it hurt easier than the truth would have. I cannot fix what I put in the ground. I can only ask. The great hall was far away. There was no gallery to hide in. The field held us and offered no furniture for pride. Forgive me. Vesper laid her muzzle along my bones. Do not answer to spare his shame. Answer because your mouth is true. I carried our child in winter, I said. I taught him to run in angles so straight lines couldn't catch him. I learned how to make soup with regret and still have it taste like supper. My throat tightened. I let it. You did not come for me then. You set me on a road and watched it snow. He took it. Every word, like a punishment he thought he deserved and feared he didn't. I will come now, he said, not to claim, not to unmake the life you built, to stand where I should have stood, to know my son if he'll have me. Behind us, Kalen did not move, but I felt the tough fabric of his steadiness shift. He saw the quiet fire in me flame the wrong way when Thorne's eyes found mine. He knew. Of course he knew. He had stood 2 paces behind and to the left for years. Nobody hears better than a man who has taught himself how to be nearby without taking. Rook looked through him, unblinking. Pain moved along Kalen's jaw, small and honest. He could have made a scene. He could have wrapped honor around jealousy and called it law. Instead, he set his shoulder under the moment and held. Whatever your history, he said, voice even, Iron Fang is my present. We protect what's inside our lines. Both of you understand me. We do, I said. Thorne bowed his head to him in a rare concession. You have my thanks, he said, and meant it. Later, in the hall where treaties get inked and wounds get wrapped, Thorne found me alone by the window slit. The air smelled of iron and nettle and a sweetness that would never again be allowed to smell like innocence. You used to stand like that when you were deciding which lie to make bleed, he said. I used to believe fewer lies, I answered. He closed the distance but did not touch. If I could return time... You would waste it apologizing, I said. It wasn't cruel. It was the shape of the truth. He took a breath, let it out. Let me see him. Sit with him. Not today. Not under horns. I will be better than I was. The burned wire between us sparked its phantom ache. Forgiveness is not a torch. It is small, hard work. I would not ease either of us with a yes that couldn't stand. I don't know, I said. I am not a door you knock and the hinges obey. He nodded, slow. For the first time, I saw the man I had married without the crown's noise. It was terrible, and it was almost a relief. We were not alone. Kaelin watched from the far end of the hall, arms folded, mouth a line that did not say what it could. When my gaze met his, he gave me a single steady nod that broke my ribs a little. He had always been flint. Now he was fire and refused to ask for the light back. Siren came in with Rhys, boots muddy, sling on his wrist from a scrape he wouldn't brag about. He paused at the threshold, reading the air as if it were a page. Bracken stood under his skin with ears too big for his head, all interest and early caution. Reports, Kieran said, offering papers to Kaelin first because he had been taught which lines keep rooms from falling. Good work, Kaelin said. Eat. Kieran glanced at Thorne, then away, respectful, guarded. The ache of it was complicated. I set my hand on his shoulder and felt the knot of muscle there. New and right. Malin slipped in behind, cheeks flushed from anger she had saved for later. We found something, she said, and set a folded cloth on the table. When she peeled it back, a small bead rolled and winked. Another lay sewn at the hem of a training tunic that belonged to my son. Opal winked like a cruel joke. Hemline, she said, and 3 more in boots. Whoever put them there wanted his steps to betray him, and they knew his roots. Rhys laid a map beside the cloth, red X's stitched along the creek path, the south terrace, the hawthorn stump. Places Kieran favored, places only a watcher inside our walls would know well enough to draw so neatly. Vesper's growl vibrated the length of my spine. She missed her kill, and now she will correct the math. Thorne's hand curled into a fist. She's moved from slander to murder. Kaelin's gaze flicked to the window as a shadow slid briefly over the light, then was gone. His voice was very calm. Double posts. Nothing leaves unsearched. Mira, keep him inside the hall. I nodded. My mouth had gone dry. Somewhere outside, far beyond the ward stones, a horn called 3 low notes none of us recognized. Not Iron Fang. Not Blackclaw. A third hand on the board. Rhys didn't bother with the click. That's not ours, he said. Kaelin was already moving for the door when a copper-sour wind pushed through the slit. Malin's eyes went wide. The bead on the table trembled against wood as if eager. Then every window darkened at once. The windows went black as if the mountain had put its palm against the glass. The bead on the table trembled, eager. Wrong rain slid into the hall, sweet and sick. She's here, Vesper said, low, closer than breath. Chiron, I started, already turning. A whisper of air. The tiniest quarrel hissed past my cheek and bit the pillar by my son's head. Barked warnings flooded Iron Fang's link. I felt the pressure shift even if I couldn't hear the words. Kieran pivoted, arms snapping up to shield the junior at his side. Bracken pressed, all teeth. The second dart came from the rafters. No sound, a moth's flick. Thorne moved before thought. He slammed into me and passed, shoulder taking the sting meant for Kieran's throat. He staggered once, then set himself, breath rough, eyes bright with pain and decision. "Find her," he said. We did not have to. Solara stepped from the shadow above the window slit, cloak turned inside out, color wronging the light around her. Sable watched through her eyes, tail drawing the air in sharp cuts. "Almost," she said, and smiled at my son as if he were a problem she had nearly solved. Kaelin lifted a hand. Rook stilled. He was measuring angles. Reese slid left, that small click keeping time with our hearts. "Call your men off," Thorne said, voice calm in a way that meant the storm had teeth. "Oh, I did," Selara said lightly. "They simply have bad manners." Her gaze slid to the tiny dart lodged in the pillar. Pity. It would have been clean. "You think anything you touch is clean," I said. "Even your lies smell of solvent." Her mouth twitched. "You survived winter," she said to me, mild. "Congratulations. It made you useful. It did not make you necessary." I moved and she flowed backward along the beam, weightless as a promise she had no intent to keep. Two loyalists broke from the far door at her signal, blades low, aiming not for me now but for the boy behind me. Vesper rose so fast my ribs ached. "Left!" Thorne's voice snapped across my skin. Not link, not speech, just old instinct finding the only cupboard it still had. I dropped, took the first attacker's knee with my heel, sent him to boards. The second came high. Kaelin took his wrist, turned it, and placed him gently into Reese's waiting, unhappy hands. Solara fired again. Sieran breathed, watched the arrow of her arm rather than the dart itself, and moved the junior aside with a palm to the chest that would leave a bruise. He did not flinch when the dart snagged his sleeve and fell harmless. He met Solara's gaze without giving her a face to enjoy. "Come down," he said, voice very even. "Face us." "Oh," she sighed, "you have her softness and his posture." The last word curdled. "No." She sprang for the far lintel. I was already moving, hands finding the rough seam where beam meets stone. She kicked at my wrist. I took the bruise and kept climbing. Thorne grabbed the lower crosspiece to pull himself up despite the dart in his shoulder. The wound darkened his sleeve. He ignored it. We reached the landing together, old geometry catching us again whether we welcomed it or not. Solara drew a blade that shimmered glass slick. "You never belonged to this," she said, eyes on me. "You married a crown and then had the nerve to ask it to love you back." "Not a crown," I said. "A man." "A worse mistake," she muttered and lunged. Metal kissed metal. No flourish, only intent. We moved in close work, breath and blade. She was quick. She was also furious. Fury wastes steps. I let her waste them. She slashed high. I took the cut on leather, slid under, and struck with the hilt to her ribs, hard enough to steal air but not crack bone. She hissed, more offended than hurt. She feinted toward me and turned, a flick of wrist sending another bead clinking from her cuff toward the hall below. Wrong rain would spill again if it broke. Thorne, seeing it, sprang from the beam, pain making his face old and beauty making it terrible. He caught the bead mid-fall, glass slicing his palm, blood seeding the air with clean iron. He crushed the thing, opal breaking under Wolf and Will. The stink died. The hall breathed. Solara's attention flicked. In that thin instant, Kaelin moved. No sound, a presence manifesting where she now needed absence. He didn't strike. He pointed. "Look," he said, "she didn't." But I did. Kieran had taken position in the hall below, back to the pillar, directing runners with compressed phrases that bound fear into action. Blackclaw guards, those not bought by Selara, stood beside Iron Fang, shoulders brushing without apology. A new geometry, not hers. "You can't stop it," she said to me without looking. "He will find their blood, and you will be a footnote." "He will find his own spine," I said. "He has more than one inheritance." She laughed and threw herself at me again. Sable came forward, sleek and cruel. Vesper rose, teeth in my throat and grace in my bones. "Take what she stole," my wolf said, certain. "Then decide what you forgive." I met Solara's blade and turned it, kicked the beam and used the recoil to drive my shoulder into her, sending us both hard against the wall. Her knife skittered. We grappled, breath loud. She went for my hair. I let her and broke her grip with a twist that cost me 3 strands and bought me her wrist. I slammed it against the beam. Once, twice. The glassy blade fell and sang itself quiet on the floor below. Thorne reached us, face white with pain, then red with effort as he caught Solara's elbow and wrenched it out of its favorite lie. For a breath, her false composure stripped off her features like wet cloth. Beneath it, a woman ruled by a hunger that never met satisfaction, and a wolf exhausted by the work of making that hunger look like destiny. "Selara Veyra," Thorne said, hoarse. "By my word, you are no Luna, no counsel, no—" She spat in his face, not metaphor, a clean insult. "You don't get to absolve yourself by naming me monster." "I absolve nothing," he said, wiping his cheek with his sleeve. "I end what you started." "Rhys," Kaelin called, and the captain appeared with wolfsbane cord burned into leather. He bound Solara's wrists with efficiency that made mercy a practical matter. She fought. She lost. When the cord tightened, the hum she had pulled through our valley went slack. Wrong rain thinned to an embarrassed perfume. We lowered her to the hall. Iron Fang and Blackclaw formed a circle that wasn't ceremony. She stared up at the roof as if it might conspire. Sable curled small inside her, tired. "Look at me," I said. Her gaze slid and stuck. "What? Will you pity me, Mira?" She made my name a hook. "No," I said. "I will remember you accurately." I crouched, kept my hands where she could see them. "You didn't want a kingdom. You wanted a mirror that showed you bigger. You got good at breaking anything that shrank you." Something like surprise cracked her expression. Brief. Then the mask reasserted its right to her face. "Enjoy your second-hand crown," she said. "Your borrowed man." Thorne flinched. Small, honest, he did not defend himself with noise. Kaelin's profile was a blade lit by late light. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He had heard where my breath caught when Thorne moved, where my voice warmed despite my best training. "Take her," Kaelin told Rhys. "No spectacle. No speeches." She twisted to find my son. "I'll finish what I started," she crooned, and Sable found a last spark, tail slashing. "One day you'll blink and I'll—" Siren stepped closer, all grace gone to granite. "No," he said, not loud. Bracken stood at his shoulder in spirit, enormous and awkward, a young god finding its feet. That day doesn't exist. They dragged her away. The bead on the table sat still, finally bored of its own trick. Silence filled with the sound of people discovering they were still alive. Malin began humming because she couldn't not. Rhys's click fell to a tired metronome. The wardstones steadied their song. Thorne swayed once, then caught himself on the table edge. Blood smeared his sleeve. Dark. He lifted his eyes to mine, something like fear making them human. "Let me, just Mira," he said, voice raw. "I will spend the rest of my life undoing what I did to you, to him. Tell me how to start. I will do it." I felt Kaelin's gaze find my profile, then move away, granting privacy he'd earned the right to deny. It hurt the right way. He had been the wall I leaned on and the silence that let me put down weight. He saw now that my bones answered a different call. He did not punish me with virtue. Kieran stood between us, breathing slow, eyes steady. He didn't look lost. He looked like a boy who had realized the map he lived on had more than one north. "Mother?" he said, soft. Vesper pressed her head against my ribs. "Choose." I looked at the man who had broken me and the man who had held me together. I looked at my son, my future standing on his own feet. The bond flickered, not a demand this time, but an offer, small and stubborn as a seed under frost. I drew breath to speak, and the outer horn split the air with a single long note that turned every face toward the door. The horn held the note until the hall felt made of breath. It meant witnesses. It meant decisions could not be put off with clever angles or polite deferrals. Kaelin moved first, steady as a door you trust in a storm. "Outer circle," he said to Rhys, to Malin, to the link that carried iron in its voice. "Formal reception, no spectacle." Thorne steadied himself against the table and lifted his hand from the blood on his sleeve. His eyes found mine and did not look away. Varric pressed behind them, held tight. "Choose," Vesper said, not unkind. We went back to the stones. The sky had the color of metal cooled too fast. The ridge was a black line. From it came 3 figures wearing no crown and carrying no favor but age and weather. Not elders I knew, not mine. The conclave of hill packs had sent them, drawn by the scent of a lie burned in public and a king who had spoken it into ash. The tallest set a staff in the earth and watched the valley look back. "We are called," she said. "We answer. There has been treachery. There has been restraint. There must be a line for what comes next." Kaelin inclined his head. "You are welcome." Thorne did the same, jaw set. "You are needed." Their gazes moved to me, not to test, not to flatter, to see what the wind had done to a woman who once thought vows were a shelter that kept out weather. "You have 2 choices," the tallest said. "Return and stitch what was torn, or set a new seam." I felt the room that used to be my life open in me. Its furniture was familiar. Its air was not. Siren stood at the edge of the circle, posture easy, only because he had learned to balance weight with care. He did not speak. He watched my mouth. "Solara is gone from power," I said, "but her shadows will travel until they are tired. My son's future cannot be built on me, pretending the past did not happen." I looked at Thorne. He did not look away. "I will not return to Blackclaw as your Luna." The conclave took this in without triumph. Kaelin's breath left him as if he had been waiting to hear me trust the room with that truth. Pain moved along his jaw. Rook blinked once, the slow blink of a creature that sees far and does not confuse distance with indifference. Thorne's fingers curled against his thigh, the smallest flinch. Varric pushed once and then went very still. "But," I said, before anyone could build a wall with that one word, "I will not raise our son with a boundary that turns into a blade. You will be his father. You will earn it daily. You will not pull him between crowns. If there is law to write, we will write it together, and I will read every line until it tells the truth." He closed his eyes. The relief was an ache, not a shout. "I will do what you ask," he said. "All of it, and then more." Kaelin turned to the conclave. "Our border needs a mind," he said, dry. "Not a fence. I propose a wardenship, neutral, armed with sense rather than pageantry. It should be hers." The staff hit soil once, a sound like a nail driven true. "Warden of the Crossing," the tall woman said. "It answers both packs and belongs to neither. It holds the line and tests it for rot." Rhys clicked with something like approval. Malin hummed a note that meant a thing had found its name. "I will take it," I said. The words fit, not perfectly, like a new boot you want to earn. Thorne took a breath that shifted the set of him. "You could have taken me back," he said quiet. "You did not. I have no grace to ask for, and yet I ask for one. Let me stand beside you in this work when the work calls for two." "It will," I said. "Sometimes, not always. Do not force the door when a window will do." He almost smiled. "Windows it is." The conclave drew a circle in ash and salt. Kaelin wrote terms that tasted like river water. Thorne signed them with a hand that did not shake. I set my name beside theirs without hesitation. The valley watched a thing it had not seen. Law made without theater. Siren stood as witness, Bracken steady under his skin, listening like a young wolf memorizing the taste of weather. After, we ate stew that did not apologize and bread that did not crumble under the knife. Iron Fang and Blackclaw shared benches without inventing new manners. Men who had swung at each other hours before passed salt. It was not forgiveness. It was practice. Kieran rose when the cups had been put away. He did not look for permission. "We need a cohort," he said. "Mixed, small. We run each other's ridges until our feet make the same mistakes and learn the same corrections. We rotate command. We learn to argue with the same map." Kaelin tipped his head to hide pride and failed a little. Thorne listened as if each word were a rope thrown to a man learning a new edge of a cliff. "Who leads it?" the conclave asked. Kieran looked at me, then at Kaelin, then at Thorne, and shook his head with the courtesy of a young leader learning to be wary of thrones. "It leads itself," he said. "I will set course. Others will hold compass when I sleep." The staff sounded once more. "So it is." I stood with him on the terrace when the sun slipped behind the far ridge and turned stone to old embers. His hair had found a new cowlick. He did not smooth it. He leaned into the wall and looked down at the valley he had already begun to change. "You have two fathers," I said. "One by bone, one by time. You do not have to split yourself to honor both." "I know," he said. "I have a mother who taught me angles." I laughed, small. The sound surprised us both. "And a wolf," I said. Bracken's voice came up warm and big. "I am here." He smiled like a secret warming both sides. Thorne found us there and did not step closer than the line I had drawn. He stood with his shoulder to the stone and watched his son without asking for the word that would make the boy look back. "When you have need," he said to me, "any hour I come." "I will hold you to it," I said. No more vanished. We were quiet a minute. The bond between us did not sing. It did not sting. It hummed in a register I did not yet recognize. Varek and Vesper circled each other at a distance, wary and not as wary as yesterday. Kaelin joined us as the first evening stars risked themselves. He stood to my left, not my right, a placement that said he had no interest in occupying absent rooms. He looked at Kieran and then at the line of the ridge where our stones met their sky. Pain lived in him. So did pride. He accepted both like weather. "Warden," he said to me, dry as nettles, "your first task tomorrow is choosing where to put posts and where to trust the dark to mind itself." "First task tonight," I said, "is sleep." He snorted and almost smiled. Rook blinked slow, a bird that had forgiven the wind for being itself. In the hall below, Solara's name sank into stone and stayed there. There would be trials, clean ones. There would be remnants of her threads, pulled from hems and lintels and mines. We would be sweeping wrong rain out of corners for seasons. That is how poison leaves. We walked the ward line once more because bodies like ours learn truth best by steps. The stones hummed under my palm, not louder, truer. The valley counted us and did not miscount. When Thorne turned to go back to his camp, he paused as if pulled. Varek leaned forward, breath warm and cautious. "Not yet," I said. He nodded, no argument, no theatrics. He went. Kalen watched him disappear and tipped his chin toward me, a half bow to a choice that had cost him and that he would not charge me for. "You will not be alone on this ridge," he said, as if reading a promise into the dark for me to find later. "I know," I said. "I did not climb here to be alone." Vesper pressed her head against my ribs and settled. "We reclaimed the field." "Not all of it," I said. "Enough." We were turning back when Kieran's voice touched the link with a sharpness that snipped the night. I could not hear the words, only feel the valley startle. Reese ran for the tower. Malin's hum fell to nothing. From the north, where the old mines pinched the wind, a thin ribbon of scent unwound and crept under the skin of the ward stones. Opal, very faint, very patient.